2012 meeting. Do we have any questions or changes? I'm sorry.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
So we move on to the discussion and public hearing of the Farragut 2025 Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Do we have any comments from anyone? If when you do, if you will, come up to the microphone. Tell us who you are. And Mr. Winston's going to be taking notes, and he will reply to your comments in his presentation.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Mull, M-U-L. The last name is Wyman, W-Y-M-A-N. I live at 528 Wyndham Hall Lane, Wyndham Hall subdivision in the town of Farragut. I have some handouts that I would like to pass out to the Planning Commission tonight, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
So if you could just give them, and he'll pass them on down.
Thank you, Mom.
What I've handed out are some comments that I forwarded on the open house that was conducted on October the 18th on the I believe this was the first draft of the comprehensive plan. There's 4 items on here. I want to talk to you about item number 4, plan adoption and consistency. The public notice that was in the Farragut Press and the Farragut Shopper News indicated that there would be this public hearing tonight, and the resolution that was provided online indicated that the leadership team of the members of the Planning Commission and the other members of the leadership team are recommending to the Planning Commission that the plan be adopted and certified to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. What I would further add is that the Planning Commission adopt the plan, certify the plan to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and in that certification include a resolution for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to consider and adopt the plan. Now, the state law does not require, as I'm sure you all know, the plan to be adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. It does say that it's your responsibility, the Planning Commission, to make and adopt the plan. If you adopt the plan, then the plan becomes effective. If the Board of Mayor and Aldermen adopt the plan, then it becomes enforceable. And what I mean by that, under item number 4, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in 2011 adopted the Farragut Strategic Plan, just right over there on the wall, priority items for this current year. The 7 key principles in the strategic plan have been incorporated and given form in the comprehensive land use plan. So really, the comprehensive land use plan the scope of it is really a comprehensive plan. It's land use, transportation, strategic plan, parks and greenways, what else? All of those elements you will typically find in a comprehensive plan. By adopting the plan, you affirm your commitment to the strategic plan and recognition that the plan represents the community's vision of the future, and that decisions that you make about the growth and development of the community will be consistent with the plan, okay, and its vision. And third, that there will be a continuous connection between the town's strategic plan, the comprehensive plan, the capital improvement plan, and the annual town budget. That's what can be called Planning, Programming, and Budgeting System, PPBS. Okay. Now, your certification, I've asked that you include a resolution for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to consider the adoption of the plan. Because if you adopt it and the board doesn't, then you'll want to be consistent, but they won't have to because they haven't adopted it. Understand the state law doesn't mandate it. It says they may. It's the statute enables it, but it doesn't require it. Okay. The implementation of the plan is, yeah, there's Ruth. Our community development director, as you probably know, is going to have a big role in the implementation of the plan. It's community development, it's community redevelopment, it's infill, its standards, its policies have to be implemented, administered, and enforced. Okay? It's not just there for you to consider, but it's to be implemented, administered, and enforced. There was in the proposal by Winston & Associates, there was a section 9.11 which is called implementation plan, the workbook, the annual action plan, maintenance and consistencies. A comp plan workbook was to be developed. There are annual actions to be taken in the plan that you're considering. Comp plan maintenance, and finally, and probably most importantly, a consistency policy that's adopted by you all and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, indicating that decisions must be consistent with a comprehensive plan. So I would ask you to consider that in your deliberation tonight.
Okay, thank you. We have another person.
Thank you. My name's Greg Whalen. I live at 112, that's W-A-Y-L-A-N-D. I live at 112 Ida Hertzler Acres in the Powell Acres subdivision, Ida Hertzler Lane in the Powell Acres subdivision. I came here tonight, I reviewed the land use plan, and when I referred to the proposed zoning designations, specifically in the Kingston Lovell subset on that map, that the whole area around our subdivision, and actually the area incorporating our subdivision is proposed as regional commercial. Powell Acres is a small subdivision. There's 9 single-family residential homes there. We've been there for quite some time. And we're commercially developed on our eastern boundary by Costco, and our southern boundary by the businesses along Kingston Pike, and on our west boundary by U-Haul. So that leaves the north boundary, and that's Turkey Creek and Floodway. So we're pretty well developed all the way around it. And I could think of no good reason why Ida Hertzler should show a designation of regional commercial and not reflect a classification similar to, say, Stonecrest, one of the other subdivisions. So I didn't know whether that was done by error or intent, but I request that the Powell Acres subdivision, those 9 residential properties, maintain their current classification and not be regional commercial.
Okay, thank you. He will answer those questions later.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Craig Allen. I own 16 acres on Kingston Pike across from the Kroger's. I live at 7075 Duncan's Glen Drive in Knoxville, Tennessee. On the plan proposal, my property is shown as office industrial, light industrial, and I guess all that fits with me except for the residential part. I think if there's going to be a residential facet to that zoning, the unit density should be closer to 12 to 15 units per acre, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to do the residential intertwined with the office or light industrial.
Thank you.
So it's more like a mixed-use type of zone versus a light industrial office zone.
My name is Sam Gwynn, live at 330 Channing Drive. Have approximately 65 to 80 acres in the city of Farragut, and we have 4 roads going into our property on the map. It's zoned low density. It's the largest section of residential property development land on the north side of Kingston Pike. I would like to say that we talk about having apartments and duplexes and condos and what have you. It is single residential around us all the way, with Fox Den, Country Manor, Village Green. I think medium density would be possibly a little better with the number of developments that can go in there. It's probably not going to be developed in my lifetime, but I do want to say 4 roads going through this piece of property and having to connect with others is a little high. There's been roads closed in Old Stage. There's been roads closed in several subdivisions to take away from the being able to drive through with the theft, the law enforcement problems. And I think this is something that hasn't been thought of in several parcels of property in this development. Probably should have spoke up a little earlier, but, you know, the plans were going as they may, and until it gets to a final plan, you don't know what it's going to be. So I think this is 2 things that need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ken Fraser. I live in Village Green, and I have more or less of a general comment, and that is, you may recall at the last meeting there was someone who did a little survey and found out that the number of people at each of the meetings having to do with the land use and added up all those people, and the number on a percentage basis was very small compared with the residents of Farragut. And I was wondering, did you have any conclusion of something that might alleviate that problem?
He'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Would it be reasonable, and I asked this of the commission also, to have a mailing survey to all the residents with all the salient features, a brief description of the land use plan, and are you in favor of this, and what weight of importance do you place on each of these features in the plan, from 1 to 5, 1 being not too important and 5 very important to that resident? I don't know if the cost is prohibitive, if you feel it's too late in the program to consider it, but I think it would take care of the question that was raised and also give a better feeling of confidence. Is this the way the people of Farragut, the direction they want to take? And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for reminding everyone to make a little better use of the amplification system.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me ask one question.
Yes, sir.
What level of citizen involvement would meet your approval in terms of?
I hadn't thought that you might make some sort of a selection on who these questionnaires should go to. I just generally thought that mailing to all the residents would be the simplest way. Do you have something in mind of how you might select people? Random or?
I just know that turnout is not very good on issues like this. If it's a rezoning, you'll get more people. If it's you name it, you'll get more people. But you won't get thousands of people.
Mm. In a response, you mean?
Yeah. Even if you send out something, you're not going to get that kind of response.
Well, I'd certainly like to hear any suggestion, but when I saw the figures of the percentage of the people who had been exposed to the discussions and the number of people in the city, the percentage was strikingly low.
Yeah, we understand.
Maybe that's normal on all of our questions. But it kind of bothered me, and it was striking to me.
It's probably normal for most cities.
Mm-hmm. Well, it bothers me that perhaps, well, I guess the other way of looking at it is if the people haven't paid any attention to what's going on in the city, then they have no complaint. Yeah. I've heard that comment before.
We do our best to get people these series of hearings that we had on this subject. We advertised as much as we possibly could, and the turnout was what it was.
Yes. Well, this is the best turnout I've seen.
Oh, we had more than that.
And on a bad night, too.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
But I understand your concern, obviously.
It was a concern of mine, but I can see the other way of looking at it, that you can't ask every resident in the city because they wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
My name is John Smith. I live at 320 Boring Road. On the future streets plan, it shows a street that runs directly through my property from Boring Road to East Foxton Drive. That is probably, I'm going to guess that it's probably 1,200 feet from Smith Road. And that seems like a little close to be running another street down, especially through the center of my property. And I'd suggest that you look at it and hopefully delete it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Dick Kaywood. I live on Ida Hertzler Lane in Powell Acre subdivision. And taking a admittedly late look at the plan the other day, I noticed that the zoning change to regional commercial extends from Costco west along Kingston Pike, completely incorporating Powell Acres subdivision. And we're curious as what the motives are for this, because this subdivision has been there for 40 years, and most of the residents on that street have been there a good bit of that time. And I really think that they deserve better from Farragut than having their low-density residential zoning converted to regional commercial at this late stage in their game. If you were to implement that, how would you do it? Do you plan to attempt to buy up the property, to make it available to commercial interests? Are you going to use eminent domain? We're hopeful that you can be persuaded to route that regional commercial zoning around our subdivision. I think it's a limited value for that purpose. It's a single street that runs perpendicular to Kingston Pike. So I hope you will give consideration to changing that. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that has any questions or comments?
Let me just clarify one thing, and that is that this plan is not an action plan. It's a suggested way to proceed in the future. This plan changes no zonings. That takes a special act by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The plan alone simply suggests that these might be appropriate sometime between now and 2025. But it's just a map. It's not an action. We can. It's just a plan.
I guess, could I add something, Mayor?
Yeah.
That might address, especially like the Powell Acres folks. The only time that I could conceivably, me personally, being a planning commissioner, ever support a rezoning in your neighborhood is if there was some deep-pocketed developer who went to all the homeowners, unanimously, 100% of the homeowners in that neighborhood, and paid you so much money that you said, this is great, I'm going to move to the Bahamas. And if that developer came to us and said, I now have control over 100% of Powell Acres, I would like to develop something in a regional commercial style. Turkey Creek is regional commercial. Costco's regional commercial. At that point, based upon the plan, we could say it is appropriate. But in no way, shape, fashion, or form could I, number one, personally ever support eminent domain for private entities, ever. And I can't speak for the rest of the Planning Commission, and I can't speak for the Board of Mayor and Alderman, but I can speak for Noah Myers. And I can say that eminent domain has no place in benefiting the private sector, number one. But number two, the plan is just that, is that if somebody came to us and said, would this even be permittable or digestible by the town of Farragut to do something like that, assuming they had 100% of all the homeowners in that neighborhood, then we might say, okay, it might be appropriate at that time. But if there was one homeowner that said, nope, I'm not moving out, the deal would be off for me personally. And I would think, politically and philosophically, the leadership of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission would feel the same way. This is most similar to what's happened in Oak Ridge. There was a group of homeowners who were approached by a Kroger developer, and all those homeowners got substantially over market value. All those homeowners got to negotiate at arm's length. They were never forced to sell their house, but all those homeowners, from what I understand, up in Oak Ridge, they got paid so much money it was ridiculous for them to turn it down. And that would be the only time that I could see. And it required all the homeowners. I don't think Oak Ridge went in there and said, well, you're the last holdout. We're going to kick you out using eminent domain. And I would hope that the town of Farragut would never, ever think about going in that direction. And I could never support that. But I would hope that as residents of Powell Acres, you would see that all we're trying to do is create a guiding map of things that would be appropriate 20 or 25 years now, and it may never be appropriate for Powell Acres. Folks in Powell Acres may say, you know what, I'm right here to stay. I don't care who throws what kind of money at me. I'm not going anywhere. And then it's left alone. The zoning wouldn't change. You're residential today, and you would remain residential in the future. But conceptually, is what we're trying to put together is a plan to say, hey, these are things that we're open-minded to, and in certain areas, these are things we're not open-minded to. Mr. Haywood, does that help? Thank you.
Well, you said you weren't speaking for all of us, but I think you just recited the same things that we think.
I would hope so.
Hi, Rita, Tom Rossio, Oak Ridge. Excuse me, I was going to give you where I worked, but 425 Clover Fork Drive. I think the issue that Mr. Wayland and Mr. Cawood brought up is that this plan, as you pointed out, goes to 2025, maybe even beyond. And if you do what Mo Wyman suggested, which is probably a good idea to have the board endorse this plan, then you're endorsing the concept that if a developer had designs on that they could start a negotiation with the neighborhood. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure that's put on people by doing that somebody wants to sell out. And what they're basically saying, if I can speak for them, is they don't want that at all. They don't want it even in the plans. Now, I fully understand that if some developer came in and offered them all $1 million and it wasn't in the use plan, they would probably be more than happy to sell and let the developer work out the details in the future. So I don't think that's an issue. If somebody comes with enough money and everybody's willing to be bought out, that's one thing. But by putting it into this land use plan and endorsing it probably through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, you're endorsing the removal of a subdivision someplace in the future. And that's what they object to. These people may have designs for this land to be given to their children or their great-grandchildren or whatever it may be. They don't want to change from anything other than residential, and that's it. They don't want it commercial. They don't want it regional commercial. They fully understand that they have regional commercial right next door in Costco, and they've had a wonderful working relationship with Costco. It's great, but that's where it should end, right there, no further. And they understand that there is commercial along Kingston Pike. But if you were to even put regional commercial from Costco west, how are you going to buffer those folks from that development? Regional commercial is an intense development.
It is.
So that's why they're asking that you say, no, this is not the right approach. This is a residential area. In front of them is local neighborhood sort of commercial, and that's fine. That's what they've lived with. But they don't want regional commercial, and they don't have any desire to be bought out. They don't want a plan to talk about being bought out, and they don't want any endorsement of that whatsoever. So again, if I can summarize what they're asking is, please take that off the plan, leave it as residential, and everything west of Costco should stay as just commercial. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? And we'll let Mr. Winston make his presentation for us.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciated these initial comments, and I will respond to them as we go through the presentation tonight. What I'd like to do is make a very relatively brief, for me at least, presentation. You've sat through many of my presentations and been very kind and patient, so we'll try and be shorter tonight. What we want to do is just hit some high points of the plan and then use that as a foundation for some discussion, if any, at the end, and then go forward. So this process is one that we have tried to reach out in a broad way throughout the community. We've had the leadership group representing a lot of different interests and viewpoints in the community. We've had focus group meetings with lots of special interests. We've had public meetings open to the public. Admittedly, we have not been able to roust the majority of the population. We've had a relatively small percentage of the population, which is not unusual, which is increasingly common throughout the United States. And yet we take comfort in the fact that we've tried to get input in a variety of different ways, and we've tried to reach out in all of the ways that we've just talked about. At the end of the day, the Planning Commission, and then ultimately, if it goes to the board, they are the ones who need to again take stock and feel like this is an adequate representation of the public direction. At the end of the day, it does require leadership. And were we to try and reach out in some survey across the board, we've thought about that a number of times. And the difficulty with doing a survey is that, A, they are expensive. Typically, you can get if you get a 5% return, you're doing very well. We've been fortunate maybe to get 10% returns. That means you have to send out 5,000 surveys to get 500. You have to have about 500 to feel like you've got a statistically valid sampling. That puts you on about the 95 to 96% confidence level. And if you get a 2% or 3% response, you're not there yet. So you have to send out 10,000 surveys. Then the other side of the question is you have to explain so much. This is a complicated topic, and there are a lot of nuances here, and it's very difficult to boil this down to a survey of 10 or 15 questions. You all know that have been through these meetings. There are lots of considerations that go into how you feel about these things. So at the end of the day, a survey, we find, is not an accurate barometer and is not really an informed response. So what we've tried to do, again, is reach out in a variety of different ways on a very personal level. So it's not just the public meetings that we've had input through. We've had a lot of other kinds of meetings and interest groups and opportunities, including a website, et cetera. As you can see, we've had lots of interest. We've gotten feedback in all of these various venues that's been helpful, that has influenced the direction of the plan. And so we are trying very hard to listen and factor all of this together. And really, at the end of the day, this is about trade-offs. So there are no winners and no losers. There are a whole variety of difficult choices that have to be made, and at the end of the day, as the mayor said, it is a plan and not a mandate. Next. So the comprehensive plan is a long document. Next. It has, however, several different parts. We talk about the challenge that we face as a community. We talk about 8 key strategies that have emerged out of this process. There is a land use plan that has several components. There are sub-area plans that drill down in a little more depth. And then there's a series of implementation tools that are suggested. And at the end of the day, then the last section is a lot of the background that tells you how we got from there to here. So a key consideration that you need to think about is you've had this strategic plan for some time, and it's been very successful. The council has used it effectively. And we've tried to be very conscious of that strategic plan, and we see the comprehensive plan as a companion to that. And they both need to work together. The strategic plan has helped the council boil things down to a focus, a more near-term focus. And yet, at the same time, as we looked at the strategic plan and some of the controversy that still emerged from attempts to implement it, we realized that a value the comprehensive plan can bring is to give physical form, as Mole said, to the strategic plan. There are concepts that are described verbally in the strategic plan. The comprehensive plan now says, if that's what you want to do, here's what it looks like. Here's how it'll feel. Here's what it means in terms of land use. Here's what it means in terms of road connectivity. Here's what it means in terms of parks, et cetera. So the two work together, and then all of the other documents that you have, the Parks and Leisure Services, pedestrian plan, the development manual, the zoning code, the transportation policy plan, those are all subcomponents of these two main key documents. and they derive direction from and provide input to these two documents. We'll talk about how we keep these two documents in sync as we go forward. Okay. The 8 key strategies that have emerged from all the comments that we received and discussions we had several academies. We had the Downtown Academy, we had the variety, we had the economic development and shopping centers. So the strategies are there is a desire to have a downtown, some form of a downtown, a heart and soul of the community. We have a number of shopping centers that are aging, and they're beginning to have a negative impact on the impressions of Farragut, and as we see them gradually decline from thriving stores to discount stores to lesser and lesser uses over time. Shopping centers typically have a lifespan of somewhere between 15 and 25 years. And then you're left with this remnant, and you have to decide what to do with it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can find a reuse. But many times there are other things. So what the plan does is begin to suggest some ideas about incentives that might help reverse that trend more quickly than letting it wind all the way down to zero and then bulldozing it. We've talked about, a number of people have talked about housing choice and the fact that we've got a certain segment of the market well provided, that if we want to continue to have people moving into our community, people are looking for different sectors of the housing market, so we need to find out how to provide that. Connectivity is a key issue. As one of the speakers said, we have mostly single-entry subdivisions throughout Farragut, and while it does provide a lot of privacy for the folks who live within that subdivision, it has several other negative effects, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And our heritage is another strategy. How do we take advantage of the history that we have? How do we capitalize on that, and how do we take pride in it? And then we have some questions about our borders and how we annexation questions. People talked about enhancing our identity. And then finally, we have a relatively few vacant parcels in the community to achieve all these other objectives. Okay, so that's a key question before the community. Next. So the objective of a comprehensive plan, as you can see this little diagram that emerged in the upper right, is that without a plan, we're all headed in a whole variety of directions. And with a plan, the goal of the plan isn't to get everybody marching in lockstep and committed to a single course of action, but to try and coordinate everybody so that we're headed generally in the same direction, so that we have a general idea about where we're headed, and we can avoid having counterproductive sorts of things happen along the way, so that we can be generally reinforcing as we move forward. The key thing here is that all these strategies interrelate. Okay. If you change one, you change something else. And so that's the reason you call this a comprehensive plan, is because you think about all of these things in a comprehensive way and try to anticipate the unintended consequences. Okay. So in bringing about a downtown, the tools there are zoning and adaptive reuse. We've identified, as you can see in purple, several different quadrants of our main intersection at Concord and Kingston, and the 4 quadrants have different possibilities as a downtown. And so we've identified the whole area as possibly a downtown, but it may start in one quadrant or the other, and it might happen, it might all be accomplished, or only 1 or 2 of those might actually be achieved, depending on the market and future circumstances that are hard to predict at this time. But as we've said, this is a plan, and maybe another way to talk about a plan is to talk about it as an investment strategy, not as a regulatory mechanism. These are not zoning. There's a difference between the plan and zoning. The plan doesn't grant any vested rights. It doesn't take away any vested rights. A plan is an attempt to get the big stuff right. If this is going to become a downtown someday, over 20, 25 years or more for Farragut, what else do we have to do to make sure that we can accomplish this? We need to think about roadways. We need to see about trail connections. We need to think about parking. We need to think about our building codes. We need to think about allowing people to redevelop and encouraging them to redevelop, all of those sort of things. How do we bring about mixed use effectively? So as we think about it comprehensively and create an opportunity, the other possible description of a plan is it's an opportunity plan. And we're trying to describe the opportunities that are here. So there are a number of actions: review the municipal code, invite landowners to partner, and we've experienced that in other parts of the country where communities have actually taken the initiative to do some more detailed planning, where a developer might consider that a challenging undertaking to try and achieve consensus about a big idea like this. If the community were to take the lead, then you might find developer interest would come along behind and be willing to follow. So the idea that there would be here's a plan. It's been taken through the public process. If you want to follow the plan, you can have confidence that the key directions in here are supported. If you want to do something else with your land, have at it. You're welcome. This is not a requirement. You're perfectly free to do something else, but you then have to do the plan comprehensively. And you have to think about all of the consequences of whatever else you might want to propose. And then that would be beefed up by a market study that would be more specific about where the market is and where we should target the plan next. We've even taken in some areas of these, in two of these sites, and drilled down a little more deeply to try and illustrate how redevelopment might happen and how it might bring about something that feels like a more traditional downtown. And this downtown would be a very pedestrian-oriented, would not be a competition with Turkey Creek. In fact, would try very hard to be something other than Turkey Creek. The more it can connect to the surrounding areas and incorporate residential uses, the more successful it'll be. So your plan has a lot of these kinds of illustrations as idea pieces, as suggestions, enabling you to visualize how these things might look, as opposed to just putting a purple color on the map. We wanted to try and understand what those purple colors might mean next. Aging shopping centers. We've got a number of aging shopping centers. We've got some tools here. Some of them are similar to the downtown tools. Some are different. But we've provided illustrations, again, for how some of the shopping centers might be revitalized. A key part of that strategy is that there is a demand for different kinds of housing choice, and housing incorporated into some of these older centers might be enough of an incentive to cause redevelopment to happen. Next. A key part of that is, you can see some of the centers here. We need to identify where possible interventions are. And the part of the city's strategy here, again, the reason I said it's an investment strategy, is you might allocate capital improvements and funding. It's going to take a partnership here. And if we want these things to happen, it's not going to happen just by waving a magic wand. So if we're willing to go in and put in some streets, upgrade utilities, provide other kinds of infrastructure incentives, we can stimulate the process. But over time, places do change, and this is the area that we thought had possibilities, for example, of refurbishing it into a recreation center. And there are other kinds of centers around town that have different kinds of adaptive reuse. Okay. Next. Greater housing choice is a theme that's come up over and over again, and so the opportunities here are redevelopment of some of our of the downtown or the aging shopping centers. Others have to do with these vacant parcels of land. And how do you provide a wider variety? You can either develop these vacant parcels all as single-family large lot subdivisions, or you have an opportunity here to allow and incentivize perhaps even the landowners to try and add some other kinds of housing, not just one single type. And so we've identified this concept called flexible density, so that the overall average density is still the same, but it might be achieved by having some large lots and some smaller lots and some in-between size lots within the subdivision, so that somebody who's an empty nester or starting out doesn't want a big yard, may even be interested in living in a townhome. They could find something within that development, and a block or two away, someone that wants a large lot could also find that in the same on the same property. So, again, it's an incentive, it's an opportunity more than a mandate. But if we look at the zoning and update it so that we can accomplish all of this, that will help bring it about. Next. Connectivity. We had a comment, one of the comments in the beginning had to do with a property with 4 roads through it. I think it was Sam that talked about 4 roads through the property. One of the things that happens when you have single entry subdivisions, and the ones that we have here are identified in red, that's the number of subdivisions that have 1 or at most 2 entries into them. And so what that tends to do is it pushes all of the traffic back out onto the main roads, when in fact people may be wanting to go in a more direct route somewhere else. We're not talking about doing anything with existing subdivisions, but you have only a few remaining vacant parcels, significantly large vacant parcels. Those are opportunities, if you want, to rectify this and begin to provide some alternative routes. So the dotted lines that were provided here are desire lines. They're not precise alignments that trying to suggest we'd really like to get a connection from here to there. We have trail alignments as well as road alignments identified, again, as desire lines. And the concept there is if we can provide an alternative way, it's not only helping us get around town, but it's providing important emergency access. So in a major storm or hazardous condition, if all it takes is a tree falling on a road or someone having an accident on one of these, on a subdivision that has 1 or 2 access points, to really sort of jam everything up and make it difficult to get there on emergency vehicles. So we always suggest that try and interconnect communities. And again, we're not talking about interconnecting existing communities. They've been approved and built the way they are. We're not talking about changing those. This is an opportunity to try and interconnect new development in the future. Okay, next. So there's a potential roadway alignments. This one focuses on the property next door, for example, just to show how that might happen. Is it required all of those be there? No, not necessary. But they really illustrate the possibility and the opportunity and the desire of making more connections rather than less. Our heritage, we do have history in Farragut. And we have some Civil War history. We have some older history. Some of the history is fairly subtle. It's scattered around the community. And there are 2 reasons you might want to think about capturing your heritage. One is a source of pride and identity for the community, and the second one is frankly self-interest, in that the more things people have to do when they come to visit Farragut, the longer they're going to stay. So if there are historic sites for people to visit, that will help economic development as well. And so we've identified a number of actions: a historic interpretation plan, a historic markers program, perhaps encouraging developers that might have a historic resource on their property to encourage them to preserve it, and try and see if we can provide an incentive to do that. And then the other one is active use of historic properties. We have some older barns around town, for example, that might be reused rather than torn down. There might be some other buildings. You've already begun the Campbell House and the second Campbell House being reused as office or residential. All of those things help preserve that character and flavor and still provide a modern-day current use that helps preserve it. Annexations is an issue that was posed, and so we've identified the area north of I-75, east of southeast side of Kingston Pike as you come into town from the east, and then we talked a lot about Concord Village, and at the end of the day decided that probably annexation Concord Village is not in the cards and not the right thing to do at this moment in time. But the town does have an interest in Concord Road and that gateway into town. So maybe a small annexation there, just to make sure that development that happens, that may happen immediately adjacent to Concord Road, doesn't inadvertently spoil that gateway into town. And then the Kingston Pike entry is a long-term project. It's related to the gateways and identity issue, but there is a whole lot of disparate uses over there and some opportunities, if they were to be assembled and brought into town, that over a long period of time, not instantaneously, we could improve the gateways into our community. North side of town, there are some properties there that have some potential for diversifying the economy, employment, kinds of uses, et cetera, that seem appropriate up there. So those are the recommendations that have emerged with regard to annexations. Whichever one of those you decide to embark on, the concept, the steps are probably develop a concept plan first, do a cost-benefit analysis. Anytime you annex, you take on responsibilities as well as potential revenue in terms of tax, either sales or property tax. You need to see if they're balanced or not, see whether we're taking on more of a liability than we're taking on an asset. Obviously, owner feedback and involvement in the process is important. Pre-annexation agreements are important. They help pave the way and set the stage for if and when annexation occurs. Here's what we've agreed to, and then obviously there's a public approval process at the end of the day. Enhancing our identity is an important feature here. We've talked a lot about what is Farragut and what's the identity of Farragut when you come to yes, improving the gateways, probably a first step is to commission some designs. Our impression is that Farragut is not one of those places that wants to have a large welcome to Farragut sign. I think you're probably a community that wants to be more understated than that. And there's just a noticeable difference. And when you arrive into Farragut, you say, people are proud of their community here, and rather than merely putting up a sign. So we've identified some opportunities for medians and landscape corners and other kinds of tools that might help you just make a subtle difference as you cross the line into town. There's something different going on here. We've talked a lot with various folks about design guidelines, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a second, but is there a desire for more of a Farragut character? We've certainly got a wide collection of building designs going on in town and maybe that's going to continue to be the way it is, and that's fine with everybody. We heard differently. We heard from everybody that participated that we need a little bit of more continuity, and we don't want to be rigorous. We don't want to be overbearing about that, but maybe there are several things we could do. The building we're having this meeting in is a well-designed building, and so that the town itself has taken pride and tried to set an example. That should continue. The other thing we've noted all along is that Farragut has a kind of a unique character in some of the remnant agricultural areas in various parts of town. You've got some 20-acre lot areas. You've got some 5-acre lot areas that still have an agricultural feel. You have some classic barns here and there around town. And these are unique assets. And Sun Valley, Idaho, the first thing you see when you drive into Sun Valley is the old red barn. And there are other communities around the United States that have captured and taken advantage of these unique features. You've got this barn that's just off the Kingston Pike entry, and several others that are sort of set up on the hillside that would be lovely things that help set the image of Farragut apart from all of your competition, and give you a distinctive character to the town. Next. Okay. So entryways, subtle changes. Design guidelines. What are those design guidelines? Every time you mention design guidelines, it sends shivers up some people's back because it sounds regulatory, it sounds it sounds draconian, and it sounds dictatorial. And yet, if they're used as a guide, many times we hear people say, well, if you'd told me what you wanted, I would have tried to accommodate you. So in that spirit, here's what we'd like to see accomplished. So let's go ahead, Gary. And so we have a variety of building types throughout town, some of which we've heard positive things about and some we've heard some negative things about. And so we could add Costco to this list of buildings. It's still yet another architectural style. And so the question is, do we want more of a consistent character? Are there a few things we could change, encourage to be consistent? Next. So you might think about a few architectural elements, not the width of the window mullions, but you might talk about the fact that how do we feel about flat roofs? But if we're going to have flat roofs, maybe we should have cornices and parapets, such as the motels in some of the nicer motels have. The red and orange brick seems to be throughout town. We've got pitched roofs generally with large overhangs. They're not flush overhangs. You've got on most of your buildings a taller ground floor. You've got wide frame windows and doors that have a wide frame around them. A lot of buildings have awnings and insets that add variety and character. You've got most of the buildings have lintels above the windows. And so there might be streetscape things. We might make a special effort to preserve existing trees, maybe paving with certain brick types, avoiding just gray concrete. And we maybe could make more of an effort to put underground utilities. We're finding that not only does it dramatically improve the character of the place, and it's not cheap, I admit, but in some of our recent climatic problems, utility companies are beginning to realize that the above-ground utilities are much more expensive to service and maintain, and that the underground utilities tended to survive major climatic events. Okay. Again, you've got only a few vacant parcels to accomplish all of these goals. So how you develop these vacant parcels is important. And so we've talked about new zoning categories, connectivity on these new parcels. Here's a little illustration, for example, of the idea of feathering density. So someone mentioned that maybe a different density because of the neighborhood or surrounding was a lower density. The flex density concept, as it's outlined in this document, suggests that you try to match the density of the adjacent parcels at the border lines, and if you want to increase or decrease your density, then you do that within the parcels. And so we've identified some ways that you can be a good neighbor and still have flexible and varying densities. Next. So the white areas represent the vacant parcels, and the gray areas represent the areas we don't think are going to change at all over the long term. And so we're not talking about applying most of the areas, most of the concepts in the comprehensive plan have nothing to do with existing neighborhoods and existing development and areas of town. It really is focused on these areas that are possibly going to change over the next 25 or 30 years. So we have a land use plan on the left, and then we have what we're calling a comprehensive plan map on the right. The difference is that the one on the left just shows land uses, and the one on the right shows everything together. It shows the roads, the trails, the open areas, and the land uses together, and shows how it all ties together. Okay. In this document are policies, and there are lots of different policies. Okay. Here's an example. The density of new development should be compatible with existing adjacent densities. That's this feathered density. So you want to blend in and be a good neighbor to the property next door. You don't want to put townhomes next to large single-family lots just across the property line. But you could do that transition within your own property. Okay. Consistency policy. All town decisions should be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Town wants to go in another direction, that doesn't constrain the town. You just need to update the plan so that the plan remains consistent with whatever development approval you grant. And as we've said, the first 5 decisions are the key ones. If we make the first 5 decisions consistent with the comprehensive plan, the plan will be implemented. If we ignore the comprehensive plan for the first 5 decisions, then we will have spent a lot of time doing something that's not going to be very effective. We should review the plan as often as necessary, modify it. I think there's nothing wrong with modifying the plan every 6 weeks if you need to. But it certainly ought to be reviewed in a significant way at least every 5 years. And we're recommending that there be an annual review to see how we're doing and update it. And then we have things like the base density and a range of density. So scattered throughout the document are tools like that we call policies that help us stay consistent as we make decisions. Next. So how do you use the comprehensive plan? Okay. So let's take a couple of examples. If we have a development application that requires a rezoning, and here's another answer to one of the questions. The comprehensive plan really only, as Noah mentioned, the comprehensive plan really only comes into play if somebody wants to change their zoning. Okay, if you have existing zoning on your property, you have a vested right. It's been there for a long time, or even a short time, but whatever you have has been granted to you, and you have a vested right to develop as long as you follow the regulations that apply to that zone. The comprehensive plan only comes into play if you want to change that zoning. And so if you want to change, the comprehensive plan is an attempt to look ahead and say, okay, if this is going to change, what would we change it to? One example might be we're seeing a lot of older schools in some of our older communities, or schools are being abandoned or not necessary anymore. So here you have a school in the middle of a residential neighborhood. What should it be? The comprehensive plan might be an opportunity to think that through and say, okay, if we're ever going to change the use of this school, what would we want it to be? In our case, we looked at the Powell subdivision, for example, and said, gosh, it's surrounded by commercial. It seems like over the long period of time, 25 plus years, that there's a possibility that it might change. If it were to change, what would it change to? And that helps us get a handle on, not specifically that the Powell subdivision is going to have a huge impact, but in general, when you do that throughout the community, you get a better idea about what traffic you need to plan for, what utilities you need to plan for, what access points you need to plan for, et cetera. So it was not an intent. If for example, everybody believes that over 30 years that a residential use surrounded by commercial and regional commercial is what its highest and best use and what it ought to be forever, that designation can certainly be changed. As Noah said, the general intent, however, is to ask the question, if someone were to come in and propose to change it and could assemble the agreement of all of the property owners, can we have thought this through far enough ahead that we can anticipate and make that change in conjunction with anything else that we might be approving next to it? So over time, something else might happen adjacent to it. If we knew that was the long-term perspective, we might make different decisions. But those are all decisions that can be made. So if you look at a development proposal, the first thing you say, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? You follow up to the top. You go, is it consistent with both the plan map and the land use designations? If it's yes, then you look at the key areas, the sub-area strategies, and you approve it. If the answer is no, then you have two choices. You can either change the project, deny or change the project, or you can modify the plan. And once you modify the plan, then the answer becomes yes again. And then you move forward. Then you go down and look at the strategies, and the policies is the second, the light brown track. And so you're looking at the map, and then you're also looking at the strategies and the policies. And if the answer is yes, then you check the map to make sure, and then you approve it. If the answer is no, again, you have the choice. Is the strategy and policy right? If it is, let's stick to our guns. If it's not, let's modify them. If this is such a really good project that we need to reconsider the plan or the policies, let's do that. If there's a significant public benefit, was the criteria that your residents told us, let's be flexible enough if there is a significant public benefit. Okay? The plan can also be used, Gary, next. So one way you implement this is you ask all of the applicants to demonstrate how they comply with the comprehensive plan. That just becomes a little item added to the submittal requirements. You want to change the zoning, you want to change the land uses here, show us how you are consistent with the comprehensive plan. The staff should then also do an evaluation. Does the staff feel that this proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan? And at the end of the day, you all need to make a finding. Okay? And if you use the comprehensive plan correctly, it will be your best defense for someone who wants to challenge your decision. Okay? We have worked in a number of communities who didn't want to approve a project, but they had no basis on which to deny it because they had no plan or they hadn't followed their plan for many, many years. And so when it came right down to it, they knew it was wrong. They knew they didn't want to, but they had no basis on which to challenge that because the plan had not been followed for a long time or, in fact, didn't exist. So you need to have a finding that it is or is not consistent. If you will update the plan before you make the final approval, then you will be safe, and the plan will continue to be a guide for all of your decision making. The plan can also be used for capital improvements. Are they consistent with the plan? Is this where we want to put a road? Is this where we want to invest in new utilities? Is this where we want to put a new public building? Let's look at the map. Let's look at the strategies. Let's look at the prioritized actions, and let's make it consistent. One good way to do this, Gary, is to require all budget requests to demonstrate how they help achieve the comprehensive plan. Okay? So that gets all of your department heads looking into the comprehensive plan saying, oh, okay, I see this is where the city wants to go, so we'll fold that into our annual request for funding for where we're going to invest in improvements. And we know there are lots of things that are going to happen out of sequence just because there are emergencies or high demand issues, but in general, if you have a discretionary decision allocation to make, the comprehensive plan will be a valid guide. Next, there are lots of action items. We've given a whole list of action items. Basically, it's Ruth and Gary's to-do list, and for the next 20 years. And what we recommend, however, is we know we don't have tomorrow's wisdom today. We only know with the wisdom that we've gained from this process with all of your help. So we recommend that you have an annual prioritization and that you update that list on a regular basis, on at least an annual basis, so that you can say, this is what we're going to try and accomplish this year. and priorities will change. And you can look at zoning modifications, the downtown utilities, for example, how we want to put road connections in. Maybe we want to adjust those. Let's look at those on an annual basis. Okay, and another value here is that on annually you can do a report card and say, here's what we said we wanted to do. Have we made any progress in the last year? Okay. A key step, as I started out, is that you've got the strategic plan and you've got the comprehensive plan. In our mind, those are two very valuable documents. They serve slightly different purposes. You need to keep them in sync together. They reinforce each other. And so if you use the annual strategic plan reviews to prioritize actions and updates to the comprehensive plan, you'll keep both documents working together. Next. Where from here? The Planning Commission, you're going to adopt and certify the plan. And I agreed with Mole's assessment. You're charged with the responsibility to create and adopt the plan. That was done by legislatures all over America for a clear reason. They wanted to take the plan out of the political realm and put it in the hands of people who weren't worried about getting reelected. But the reality is that the board also is charged with implementing. If they don't believe in the plan, then they're not obligated to follow it. So we suggest that the board also endorse the plan, and that they also adopt a resolution that says all land use decisions will be consistent with the plan. We will either follow the plan or we'll modify the plan, depending on what the circumstances are before us. And then if you will follow the plan in the first 5 decisions you make, you're going to tell the citizens that the participation is valued. All the time and effort that they put into this is valued. When we started this process, you said, we want big turnout. We want a lot of participation. One of the questions I asked at the time was, will you follow the plan that results? If we turn out lots of people, will you follow the plan that results? The reality is that people will increasingly participate in this process if they know that you are taking the plan seriously. If we had rallied thousands of people here and you ignore the plan, they will never come back. Okay? Those that participated this time will come back if you take their work seriously. If you ignore it, they will not feel like it's worth coming out the next time. It's time to update the plan. Okay? If the plan, first 5 decisions are consistent, the town agencies, the staff, the planning commission, the board, you'll all be on the same page. Developers will be on the same page, and other agencies will have a page to follow as well as they think about gas and electric and all of the other ancillary kinds of things that need to be implemented here. Next. So this is sort of my attempt at opening a discussion here. This is a Jeopardy board. You can pick any one of these topics, and we can wade into those, or you can pose another question. But this is a variety of things that often come up, and that's the end of my presentation, formal presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for explaining those to us. Do we have any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
You know, a comment I'll make, the one slide you had back there, which I think really laid out how this plan is supposed to be used. You know, if it doesn't meet the plan, if it's a yes or no, and how you work your way through it. It's really no different in business planning, quite frankly. You know, I think, first of all, everybody that came tonight, the comments that I heard, they're all accurate. You know, nobody's wrong with their comments. Everything that was raised are things that need to be taken into consideration every time something is brought before the board for final approval. You know, having a plan like this, I'm going to change the terminology a little bit. It really is more of guiding principles for us to determine if we make a deviation from this, how does it affect all the other pieces to this master puzzle, right, this master vision that we have. And sometimes things will change. You know, to give you just an analogy that everybody can relate to in this room, a very successful gentleman that I work with 5 years ago said when he saw Walmart being built in what is now Turkey Creek. He said, that's going to be the biggest failure I've ever seen. Nobody's ever going to go over there and buy anything. And now look at Turkey Creek. There's people coming from around the country to look at that development and say, what's made that so successful? You know, the folks in Powell Acres have a little gem there. And, you know, that's nothing that anybody up here wants to see change. And I won't be redundant from what Noah said because it was spot on. If you look at the history of this community and the reason that it was founded to begin with, really takes into account everything that you have concerns about your little development there. You know, nobody wants to see the great gems in this community destroyed. And, you know, I can assure you that most of us, if not all of us, up here want to have that same thing happen. However, as we look down the road several years, things will change. And a term that I use an awful lot, I've said this statement probably 20 times in my term on this board, is evolution. There are going to be things that are going to come before our community, before our board, in the future that none of us can see today. There's going to be new types of housing. There's going to be new types of businesses, new types of construction. All these things will test our mettle from time to time as we look at, again, these guiding principles. Where roads ultimately end up, we don't know. If you look at, and Mole, I believe you have it verbatim out of the Tennessee Code annotated. You know, it doesn't say, and I think this is critical here. It says it is the function and duty of the Planning Commission to make and adopt an official general plan. It does not say a specific plan. It allows the ability for things to change. But what you have here with this plan is guiding principles for the members of this board today and those that will come after us to have somewhere to go back to and say, okay, we have this in front of us. How does this fit into the vision? And that vision is never going to be crystal clear. It's always going to be a little bit blurry due to all the reasons that I just mentioned before. But I think overall, we have a good guiding document before us. And it will serve us well if we continue to look at it. It will not serve us well if we don't follow it at all, and it will not serve us well if we're completely blinded by it, where we say, well, this is what it says. We have to stay exactly on this course. Things will change and times will change, and the needs of this community will change.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Jeff, how do you find the best way to utilize the connectivity between new subdivisions and at the same time discourage some of the through traffic that has caused us to actually end up closing some roads? And Sam Gwynn pointed it out. We have closed a few roads in the town of Farragut over the years, and it's basically because we have through traffic problems where a group of people that are typically not residents of that immediate area are cutting through the neighborhood to go somewhere else. I understand the benefits of the connectivity, but what's the best tool to use to find a median that works for everybody?
Yeah, good point. I'll answer two ways. One is that, in fact, allowing somebody within your neighborhood a choice of which way to go somewhere else means that you can spread the traffic around. You're not forcing it all onto somebody else's street. The way essentially the message you want to send is, if we need to have a second way through our town or this community, yeah, you can come through our neighborhood, but you have to come through on our terms, which means you're going to go slowly, and it's not going to be convenient. So most of the areas don't have just a straight-through road, but you have a series of roads that are, in fact, not all that convenient to go through, so that you wouldn't want to go through because you're trying to save time. You're only going through because it's closer or it's on the way to the direction you're going. In most cases, the primary users is going to be the neighborhood itself. It's not going to be a lot of people cutting through. So I'm sympathetic and understand the issue about wanting security and wanting to have eyes on the street and make sure you know who's using the street. All of those can be handled. So we use a lot of techniques. One is we typically have a little narrower streets in residential areas. Another one is that the streets don't go straight through. They tend to come and tee and then change and go back again, but eventually you can find your way through. So there are ways that you can still have connectivity but not have it be a cut-through.
Anyone else?
If I can I go back and just answer a couple more questions I didn't get to. Craig Allen talked about his property that had office and light industrial, and that a slightly higher residential density. He may be right. That the intent, we saw that as being close to. It's separated by the high school and the baseball field from, but it's very much in the nexus of all of the potential downtown areas. So if residential were to happen there, it would be ideal as a mixed-use kind of development. As we tend to calculate density, we discount the bottom floor and say that's going to be office or commercial kinds of uses. So when it looks like a lesser density that we assign to the property, it's only because we're really sort of calculating the upper 2 or 3 floors. And if it were a density of 15 to 20 units per acre, then you might think about it as just a residential neighborhood, which I don't think would be bad either. So I think that's something to monitor and think about as you go forward here. But he's right. The intent is to allow a variety of uses to happen on that property, and if a higher density is necessary to bring about residential, and that is compatible with the other kinds of uses that might make that successful, it's right in the heart of the downtown, and it's going to be within walking distance of quite a few commercial areas. I think the more people that we could put on that property, the better. Sam mentioned 4 roads into his property, and it might seem like that's overkill, and maybe it is. And yet we've said that those lines are really desire lines, not specific alignments. If the same objective can be accomplished by combining a couple of those alignments, the key thing is we want to connect from point A to point B, and we just did something to diagram what that might look like, but there may be a variety of reasons, either when you lay it out with lots, or maybe there's some topographic issues or something else that might suggest a slightly different alignment. The key thing is being able to get through the property, and again, it's not to be a racetrack or a cut-through. It's just to be able to get an emergency vehicle, a school bus, and other kinds of uses to not have to drive all the way around and back in to pick up kids or provide service to people. A medium density development, again, the concept of feathering densities and this flex density idea that we're suggesting is one that we think can be utilized here, where you blend with the surrounding single-family, low-density densities around you, but you increase the density internally within your lot, so you absorb the impact and don't put the impact on your adjacent properties. That's the concept. So I think it's possible that if he were someday to think about developing his property, that coming in with a request for higher density would be consistent. And then John Smith talked about the road through his property. 1,200 feet is maybe too close to the next road. It might be. Generally, a block length is 300 to 600 feet, and we're looking at trying as much as we can to remedy the connectivity issues in town on the remaining opportunities. So again, as long as the key concept here is that it's not intended to be a cut-through, it's not intended to channel a bunch of traffic through, it's merely intended for both convenience of the residents within that development as well as emergency access. And, we find it in one community, one parish in Louisiana, they have 200 school buses because they have all single-entry subdivisions, and they have to have that many school buses because it takes them that long to drive in and back out of the entryway. And we calculated the cost of that to the public. I mean, they've really foregone the ability to build 2 additional schools because they've had to have buses to cater to that kind of ineffective and inconvenient circulation. So you have an opportunity to improve it a little bit, and we encourage you to do that. I think I addressed most of the other comments in my earlier remarks. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? Gary?
I think as far as the adoption process, Jeff wants to cover that again, but our recommendation, and I think I can speak on behalf of the leadership team for this plan. We recommend that it's adopted, certified to the board, and I think contingent upon any minor changes, grammatical adjustments, and putting it in its final format, we're recommending approval.
We gave you an administrative copy about a month ago. We last week gave you a little sneak preview of a more graphically improved version of that, just to show you that we're going to make this into a nice professional finished product. We typically do that after the thing is approved, just in case there are any changes in the final adoption process. So we hope you would grant us the ability to go back and catch all of our typos and grammatical mistakes and embellish some of the graphics here to help illustrate the points better.
Okay, Gary, how do we handle the changes that will come about after our discussion?
Well, if you want to itemize the changes, if there's anything major that you want to change with the existing proposal, we should probably talk about that in a little bit more detail so we know exactly what the Planning Commission wants. And then I would just suggest you make that list a condition of that approval and have it go along with the reading of the resolution.
Okay. Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any major changes that they wish to have incorporated?
I do. I'd like to make a motion that the Powell Acre subdivision would be changed on the growth plan, on the comprehensive plan, back to residential.
Do we need to go over these one at a time or take a vote one at a time? Or
I think probably doing it one at a time just for clarification. And I'll again defer to Jeff, but I think with the Powell Acres that do we want to stay away from doing small changes? I mean, we're with these categories, we're looking for larger areas. So maybe we need to talk about how we adjust that.
I'm sympathetic to the comments that were made. We're certainly not trying to put Powell Acres in anybody's bullseye here. But at the same time, this is not a zoning plan. We're not talking about zoning. We're talking about long-term prospects and where the community goes. So as a matter of general policy, you wouldn't approve a new subdivision that's surrounded by commercial development. But in this case, if it's your plan, and we defer to your judgment here about how you want to handle that, if you want to make that one residential. But I would encourage you not, as a general practice, to think of this as a zoning plan, that you're going to go back and look at individual properties and modify those, because we're talking about bubble diagrams, really. We're talking about big picture stuff.
No, I don't really see any point in making a change. Powell Acres is currently zoned residential. It's not going to get changed unless it goes through the formal process. And just because this general thing may foresee sometime in the future that may happen, certainly doesn't put it in the target for anything.
I think what Tom Rosil said is that this plan does endorse the Powell Acres as a commercial development. And my thought is this: if a developer was able to get a consensus, a unanimous consensus from the residents, and he wanted to come back to us, and the developer wanted to change the comprehensive plan and then change the zoning, the developer could do that. It's going to take a little bit longer to change the plan and then change the zoning. But my feeling is that if we're giving the residents of Powell Acres heartburn over this, and they have no desire for their neighborhood to ever be in the bullseye, then I think they're the owners of the property. I think the property should not be in our regional commercial plan.
I think we have to be careful relative to looking at how the plan is and what it is and what it isn't. I'm very, very sensitive to, I'll say, the tactical view as a property owner. I think we all have an emotional attachment to lots of things in this town. First of all, the property you own and live on. But I have to coach myself to stand back and look at this as a vision that might be something that's out there, that if I was looking at this without all the individual ties that I have, that everybody has to individual pieces of property or what have you at the moment, and look about what does this look like as a town, and how do we realize potentially some visions along that we're going to revisit routinely. We certainly understand and are extremely sympathetic to the technical issues and things like Powell Acres with respect to those feelings quite a bit. But I think we start dealing with individual comments per se, we're destroying the whole concept of a strategic plan to the nature of this. And I think that's totally, I don't think that's necessarily consistent, because I think there is a tie to what each one of us as individuals has an emotional tie to something in this town. Tom, I had one more comment.
Go ahead.
To mine first.
Go ahead.
And I think that going along with that is a historical perspective of how the town has operated since it was incorporated. And was incorporated around trying to do the best we could for everybody in this town, so that we had some control over what we were doing here within our town boundaries, as opposed to what politically might have been done from external to it. So I think you have also the history of the way the town has operated and been sensitive to the input of the citizens and specific landowners. Has it been 100%? Probably not, but it's been a lot real close, I think.
Well, I'd agree with you, but I think what this plan is, this is looking into the future, and this board will not be constituted elected officials forever. It'll be somebody else. There'll be a different planning commission. And so we look at this plan and we say, it's opening the door to something that we don't want opened. Now, if we looked at this plan and we saw, say, the duplexes in Village Green on Kingston Pike as being future commercial, if we saw Turkey Cove as being regional commercial in the future, if we saw other things which indicated changes in the plans that identified other subdivisions, maybe we could understand that. But when you identify one subdivision, the smallest subdivision probably in the town, I think you understand why they feel a little picked on. And so it really bothers them a lot. It doesn't make sense to do this. And I think you do have to consider, what would you do if this was your subdivision, your home? Do you want it identified as something commercial? And I don't think you would. I don't think you would want it to disappear. And so all we're asking is that Powell Acres not be basically pulled out as the only subdivision in the town that could be considered as part of the future plan. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to them. I think it's very reasonable to have regional commercial end at Costco. There's a buffer between Costco and Powell Acres. They're buffered by the Turkey Creek tributaries that go through there. It's a beautiful, small residential area, and they want to preserve that. They don't want this into the plan. They don't think it makes any sense. And frankly, I haven't heard anything that says anything other than, well, it's just sort of it's just something that could happen in the future. A lot of things could happen in the future, but why identify one subdivision? And I will point out, too, as you well know, Ed, that I think Concord Hills and Powell Acres and Stonecrest voted to be annexed into the town of Farragut because they wanted additional protection.
I'm very
from
well aware.
what could happen from Knox County. This doesn't feel like the type of protection they had hoped for back in 1988.
Thank you.
If I could, I have a couple of thoughts. One, we could stop the regional commercial at Costco, and we could do one of two things. One is we could make a designation for Powell Acres. It'll look like a yellow square in the middle of a commercial designation. The other possibility would be to put a notation in the sub-area plan, the sub-area plan that says Powell Acres is an existing residential neighborhood and not intended to be converted to commercial by virtue of this designation, but we're looking at a larger scale or something to that order. We could make some notation that reflects the concern of the residents, and I'm torn with the idea. I understand the concern about sending the wrong signal, but at the same time, I'm also concerned about beginning to make spot changes that make this sound like zoning. So some sort of a notation might be another alternative. But we'll do whatever you want to do, and any one of those options, including the one that Tom's mentioned, are workable.
I like the idea of a notation, and I'd like to see us do it in that manner. I'm on the same page as those of you that live in Powell Acres. I don't want to see anything happen to your community. And I wonder if by putting it in a notation, and we could even expand the notation to state that it would be our intent that we would not have, our intent would be to not have a rezoning of that area unless we had 100% agreement of the residents. I think that's a heavy footnote. It's a worthy footnote. Quite frankly, it gives you as much weight. I go back to the term I use, guiding principles. This plan, regardless of what color, shape, designation lays over the top of Powell Acres, doesn't mean it's ever going to be rezoned. Doesn't mean it never will. And all we can do this evening is collectively say we don't have any intent of doing that.
I've been sitting in the back, and I just, as your planner that goes through and reviews these requests before you, I tend to agree with what Noah said. I think he was spot on with this, is that when you would have a developer come in en masse like what happened and I've dealt with the planners in Oak Ridge regarding their, as they've been going through with their Kroger development, in that when you have a developer, a single developer come in and buy out, that is a significant change, and that does warrant an amendment to your land use plan. I think the issue that Powell Acres residents has, and what Noah hit the nail on the head about, isn't the developer coming in and buying it in mass. It's the one person that's located behind Marty McDonald and says, hey, I want to be zone commercial because I'm backing up to commercial, and you get that inroad into it. And it's kind of what happened with Concord Hills when we first annexed it, and this is before my time, but the town filed a lawsuit against Breadbox because they didn't want the neighborhood to have that inroad of one parcel at a time. And it's what Farragut Crossing was very worried about when the town adopted the county zoning and that front part was zoned commercial. They didn't want the inroads back into their neighborhood. So I think, and given the size of this neighborhood, it doesn't take much to get into inroads, and I don't know how many of you have been back in that neighborhood, but it truly is a very unique neighborhood in that you have no idea you are in the middle of that heavy commercial area because of the creek, the buffer, and things like that, and it's a very unique neighborhood in town, and it is definitely worth saving. So I just wanted to bring that forward because I'm not concerned about the developer coming in and saying, hey, I've worked with all these residents and they're agreeing to sell out. That is something that is a huge change. What I am worried about as your staff planner is getting the one person that's at the edge that kind of does that, that little chinking away. And I know that was Bel Air's big concern when we were dealing with the church. And several of you were on the commission as we were going through that process, which was a very long, difficult process. So just kind of keep that in mind in light of what Noah said. That's my perspective as your planner with regards to that. So,
thank you, Ruth.
So, Ruth, I want just a point of clarity. Is your statement? I want to make sure I'm clear on it. Your preference would be that we remove. I don't want to word this. That we make it an island. Is that
yes,
what you're,
it is.
Okay.
Because that's really what it is, and it is a very low density or a low density residential, and similar to other neighborhoods that we have, and it is unique because it has Turkey Creek back there, and like I said, if you've ever been back there, you really do. You drive back there and you're like, I can't believe I'm this close to Kingston Pike and everything else. It is very unique.
Well, if Noah's suggestion was a motion, I second it.
Do we need to get Noah to restate?
Mine is, I think, simpler than the footnote, in all due respect, Ron. I think if we just change it back to the yellow or tan, which is either very low residential or low residential, and even if it is an island of yellow or tan, I'm not sure a footnote is necessary. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a big change. And changing the neighborhood to commercial should be a big change. That should change the plan, and it should involve 100% of the residents. And so my thought is just take that area is that salmon colored? Or I'm not sure. But nevertheless, that area right there, and make it probably is most appropriate with Stonecrest, I would assume. Of course, the lots in there are pretty big lots, too. They might be bigger than Stonecrest lots, so maybe it should be very low instead of just low. So, well, no, we've got all of Stonecrest is very low, so that's probably most appropriate. But I'll leave that up to somebody else. But nevertheless, I think a residential classification is, and that was a long-winded way to make a motion. I apologize. So I make a motion that we accept the plan. We recommend a resolution to the board, mayor, and alderman to recommend adoption, and in the plan reflect the change of Powell Acres from regional commercial to residential. Gary, did that make sense?
Yeah. Do you just want Powell Acres, the residential used area, because you have a frontage out there that's commercial right now? So, how do you want to?
Wakes with the hardwood flooring store, and then
I believe those are.
And then maybe the frame is Art and Frame outlet right there. Well, I think those need to be reflective of commercial because they're zone commercial today.
Right, but I think the regional commercial should end at Costco for that bump bridge. Both of those on that side, on Kingston Pike and Global Road. Everything west is commercial along Kingston Pike. All acres.
You're saying including the U-Haul and including the new service store. It's not a tire store. It's a
oil thing.
Oil change.
We agree with that.
I think I can agree with that because those parcels are so small. To me, those parcels are too small to meet the definition of regional commercial.
The only way you can make it regional commercial is to buy up residential lots.
I agree because they don't have the depth.
Right.
Okay.
If you're going to make it residential, we should also extend a regular commercial up to that point.
And actually, this is probably a little bit better. It's kind of a transition, even though we still kind of have an island in there of Powell Acres. But that basically what I'm saying is my motion also includes the changing of the area west of Powell Acres all the way over to, Ruth, what is the road right there at the Patriots Corner? Newport. Changing all the way to Newport to red, which is, I think, our general commercial. Okay. Jeff, does that make sense to you? All right.
Well, I still second it.
I'm glad you didn't try to repeat it. We'd be here all night.
Do we need to clean that up, Gary, or is that
I think we got it.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I have a question.
Okay.
we're dealing with one comment. My comments are directed at the process of looking at this strategically. I wasn't directing anything specifically at Powell Acres. I'm looking at, if we do this motion on this one, are we going to go through each one of these? I mean, Mr. Smith's comment is just as valid as any other comment. Do we want to revert, table this tonight and go back and take these comments into consideration as the working team with Jeff and company, and come back and say how we're addressing this?
That was when
was
you made the motion
really,
originally, and then when you made the motion to
we
also approve the plan, we had discussed earlier to take these items that are the general comments that we're going to change, to put in there one by one.
I guess what my thought is, Ed, is I felt like Powell Acres was a big enough deal to me that I wanted it on the record. The other items with Mr. Smith's property and Mr. Gwynn's property and the roads, I felt those are more minor items. They don't change the use.
Well, they don't feel probably it's minor.
They may not feel it's minor. But I felt like that those items could be handled otherwise. I do think
I see a level playing field for everybody.
Well, I mean, I couldn't justify 4 entrances onto Sam's property, and the same thing with Mr. Smith's property.
But that day will come if you ever have to take up that issue.
Any site plan or preliminary plat would come before us for a development on those.
Well, I think there is a difference. With their property, and again, as Commissioner St. Clair said, for them it's big issues. But we don't have the specifics yet on their pieces of property. There's a lot to go on their pieces of property yet. I mean, just because we have a imaginary road, that's all we have right now on a slide. There is no road destined there. Okay, going back to Powell Acres, it's already there. I mean, it's black or white. There's no gray there. So I think there is a significant difference between the two. Saying we're going to leave Powell Acres as residential, it's already there. Saying we might put 4 roads, heck, we might put 10 roads on your property. I mean, who knows what it's going to look like? But there's a big difference between the two, I believe.
But Sam hasn't sold his property; he still controls it.
That's exactly
Right.
So everything else is just a guess, but Powell Acres is already a reality.
Is that sufficient with you, Gary?
Well, I think when we were talking about the voting, my thought was that we would, each individual issue, if it was important enough for a vote, you could take that vote, and then after everything's done, you could adopt the plan with those changes that you previously voted on.
So
whatever the commission's comfortable with.
As one set.
I'm sorry.
As one set. So if there's anything else on here, we should make one motion, incorporate comments. That's my point. Not just to deal with that one, and then everything else is just all other. We need to consider each one of these, and if there's a motion that needs to be incorporated in. That's my whole point.
So
I'm not running for office, so I'm just interested in the process and a level playing ground for everybody that had a comment tonight.
So we're issue 1, then we're past issue 1.
Right.
We've got Powell Acres. If there's other issues, then we could talk about those and do the same thing. If that's what the commission wants to do.
That's what we want to do.
I recommend that's what we do. So we can get all this out on the table tonight.
So we go with the number 2.
Whatever that issue is. Are we taking up other issues?
No.
And I would recommend anybody in the audience who has those issues can.
No, we've not voted, Ruth, on I don't know if we're going to vote issue by issue or we're going to pile them all together.
Vote issue by issue.
So we have a motion second, so we should be ready for a vote on the first issue. Is that, Madam Chairman? Is that
not on the plan in general, but on just the one, which you made a motion on the whole comprehensive plan, correct?
Can I withdraw that motion and we'll do these one at a time? I'll withdraw my motion. A new motion that I have is to change the classification on the comprehensive plan map of Powell Acres from regional commercial to residential. And to stop regional commercial at the western boundary of Costco and change the area from Powell Acres over to Newport to commercial, which is the red color.
Just wonder if there's anything else we want.
Okay, that's
Probably do need a second.
Okay.
Somebody else needs to do that this time.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All those in favor of adding that to, is that correct, Gary?
It's not adding, it's substituting.
Substituting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
No.
No.
Ron did.
Ron did. Okay, Ed is going to go down the list.
Well, I think the question, Chairman, would be to ask the others who made these comments if they feel like there needs to be something specifically addressed, or are they comfortable with the answers they got?
Right, yeah.
From others, or are they
comfortable with the answers you got?
Sam or John, did either one of you want us to take on any of the issues that you've discussed tonight? I mean, directly in a motion?
Or was what we talked about with Mr. Winston satisfy your question? Wait a minute. Mr. Allen's already up here. Let's let him.
Go ahead with him.
Well, I would like to see mine, since Jeff was in favor of the density, to change mine to a purple. That's where you get to the 12 to 15 units per acre. It gives you the same, basically same uses. Or you could use the same way I've got and just add the different. It doesn't. If you don't have enough density, there's no reason to ever try to change the zoning to have residential added, because there's not enough residential to take the chance on changing the zoning. You just keep it what it is. So if you have a greater density, then there is a chance that you can incorporate the two together, the offices or whatever the mixed use would be.
Well, the whole thought is that we are not changing, and we're not going to, after this process is over, the Planning Commission is not anyway in the future going to come in and change the zoning.
I'm not saying about that, but for me to do a different use other than just office, which is what my zoning is now, to do something where you have residential, unless there are more units, I would never try to change the zoning. But, from talking to other people, they would like to see a residential as part of the piece of property. And to do that, you need to have more density.
I can't disagree with Craig. I mean, I'm kind of going along with the location of it. To me, it does make sense to be more of a purple color for mixed use. I know there are some issues with the floodway and the floodplain there, and I think those are kind of designated in the green area. I'm talking about the blue area that right now is on the map as office light commercial, which is consistent. Well, excuse me, light industrial. The office 01 is consistent with what the zoning is today. But personally, I think a mixed use with a residential component with some office, maybe some retail on the main floor, would make sense there. Now, I mean, if we're going to go through all these items,
and it could be different. It could be different. You could have residential in one part of it and something else somewhere else. I mean, you could divide the piece of property up. You could have a mixed use, like a town center type use, or you could have if I knew there was more units. I mean, I've had people that say, I want to build
apartments. Right.
There's no way you're going to build apartments at 7 units an acre. I mean, it's not feasible. It's not economically feasible to do that. To have an economical feasible product, it's going to have to be 12 to 15 units to justify changing the use to a mixed use.
Would the mixed use town center force Mr. Allen to include a commercial or office component, or would it allow him to do an apartment component? Now, obviously, I'm stretching out in the future here and assuming that he would bring a rezoning application in front of this board, and then we would look at the map and say, well, is it consistent with the map? Well, we're putting the map together tonight, and I guess what my thoughts are, I mean, personally, I'd like to see a mixed use, but that may not be in the cards for you. It may be more of an apartment style use, but this is why we're all here. Yeah, I think you did. Maybe for a C1. I think for maybe a year or two ago for a C1 zoning, but nevertheless, I think this is as good opportunity to kind of discuss, because we're putting the colors on the map tonight.
Right. Well, based on what Jeff was saying earlier, the density does matter. In the qualifications for a use, density is one of those first questions you're asked.
That's correct.
Are you within the density? Well, I can't ever see changing my use, which may be to something that may be better for the town, if I don't have enough units to justify making a change.
You're saying if the plan that we're putting together tonight is not reflective of what you're talking about.
Well, it's 4 to 7 units based under that.
Right here, I'm just looking at just basically it just shows offices. The blue is what I was looking.
See, this is the trap you get into.
Is the back of that backs up to the high school road? Is that residential back there? Jeff, are we following your train of thought here?
I read it in your.
Okay.
Yeah, the office is sort of a mixed use.
Okay.
As yes, it includes a residential component, as we're suggesting. It's not under current zoning. It's,
right. Let me ask you this: from a 10,000-foot view,
yeah.
What do you see from the outside looking in?
Let me see if I can answer your first question. The mixed-use designation intends there to be a mix of uses. Okay, that's the goal.
Okay.
Now, we have to have that as a separate conversation with you and Ruth and your staff as you reconsider the zoning about whether you think you have the ability to say you only get that zoning if you have the mix of uses, as opposed to cherry picking 1 or 2 of those uses in the mix and only putting in residential, for example, and not putting in the other component of it. But where I agree with Greg, I think that you're talking about a town center, and residential is going to help support a town center. So, if
isn't this point of this plan is to identify like a mixed use, and then in the future develop necessary zoning?
Exactly.
Plan's not called.
Exactly. We're not going to referee that tonight.
Anyway.
Yes.
So I don't see any need.
Well, but there would never be another zoning request because the density under the office light commercial is 4 to 7, and so.
Jake, again, the purpose of this plan is to come up with these ideas and then go forward and make zoning changes to support what needs to be done in the plan, like a mixed-use issue. If you require it to be zoned with different densities, that should be done as a separate action.
And at the time, the action is going to take place.
And the board, of course, can take those kinds of actions without ever anybody making a request.
Well, but
to redefine the.
No one would ever take the chance of doing a design for greater units if it's not shown on the comprehensive plan.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that position on it because that's not the intent of the comprehensive plan. Is to
well, one of his very first things says that the number of units would be one of the defining questions in deciding whether it met the plan or could go forward with a change in zoning. And so, if
who are you talking about having that question to you?
What's that?
The number of units.
Well, it's either me as a developer or someone else wanting to develop the property. The process of going through a plan, if you know you cannot, if the designation is only 4 to 7, then there's no use to ever consider putting residential as part of the project.
Well, in that case, we'd never hear a request for rezoning and an application to do something with it, and that happens routinely.
Well, but wouldn't you want? I mean, from what the feedback I got,
we're not to make zoning map changes per se.
No, it's not a zoning map change. That would happen if at a later date when somebody submitted a plan for approval. But if you don't have the density, it would just stay as an office zoning. And then you would not ever have the residential component. So,
Jeff, can you address that density question that he has?
I think what Craig is saying is that the comprehensive plan can be an incentive for someone to propose a change in use. If the underlying existing zoning is different than the comprehensive plan is suggesting, and that's attractive, then that becomes an incentive to, or at least an invitation to come in and propose. If you're not changing the underlying, the comprehensive plan designation is the same as the zoning, then on his own initiative, he'd have to first come in and propose a change in the comprehensive plan designation if he really wanted to make that residential, significant density residential. He'd have to come in and propose either high-density residential or town center, as he's suggesting here. So the key issue here is that the comprehensive plan is based on sort of what the staying with the status quo. If you wanted to raise the sites a little bit in the earlier conversations, there wasn't any inclination to do that, so we acquiesced and left it at where it was. Right. And that you could handle that a separate way. You can come back and amend that density, but I would not do that tonight. I would think about that because that designation occurs in several other places, and you might be affecting other places in an unanticipated way. And frankly, you could come back in and create a new zone with Ruth's help. You could come back in and say, look, in the center area, we want an office kind of use with a higher density residential component to that. Let's create a zone that does that. And you could do it that way. And you wouldn't necessarily even try to introduce commercial here because commercial is going to have a tough time succeeding in this little isolated area. It's not part of the pedestrian experience of everywhere else. What Craig's asking for is residential that would be a companion to his office industrial kinds of uses. So the reason we didn't make it town center and didn't make it commercial is because it doesn't have that flow. It's not an integral part of the pedestrian network. So, but I'm sympathetic to the idea of higher density, but I don't think I would do that tonight. I would come back and visit that as a separate issue. It's a valid point that he's raising and worthy of accomplishing, but I don't believe I would adjust the definition of commercial, of business light industrial. I wouldn't change the density component of that without thinking about it a little bit longer than a 15-minute discussion.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do we have another issue that we need to consider?
Mr. Smith?
My yes, no was I understand that this is just a planning stage and it's not set in stone and all like. But I think my concern is that once a road or whatever gets drawn on a plan, even though it's a plan way off in the future, sometime or another that sometimes gets set in stone, and then people say, well, there's a road that's supposed to go right here. Now, that road's not going to go there because I've only been there for 63 years. And maybe in another 37 years, I might sell that place. But I'm an old feller that just don't like change and don't like to see lines drawn on a map through his property. And I hope you understand that. I understand if it's a plan. I understand it will probably not be implemented in my lifetime. But I'd like, and when I said 1,200 feet, I don't know exactly how far it is from Smith Road, out Boring Road, to where this road is going to go through there, proposed road. But it just seems like, and it's a straight shot from Boring Road down East Fox Den. Now, what you don't realize is on the other side of Boring Road, it goes all the way down across Doug Horn's property and connects into the red light at Ingalls. Now, if you look at that road and what's boarded up right there, that's a pretty good-sized road. And it's going to go right on up and right up to the hill. On the bigger maps that was earlier, the first, not the last meeting, but the meeting before that, it goes up and it looks like it's going to go through one part of the property. On the little map back here, it looks like it goes right through the center. If it just looks like that it is awful close, maybe 1,500, maybe 2,000 feet from Smith Road. Looks like it's an overkill for me. And I just would rather it not be on the map. That's all my concern. I know it's future. I know it's a plan. That's all.
Well, there's not going to be any road building that takes you to nowhere. So there's nothing there to go to. So, and you own the property, right? You're in charge. If you don't want a road, there ain't going to be no road.
Sam, do you have a question, comment?
I do. The road part I understand. The density part I don't quite understand. As you can see, the property where Boring Road loops around, and you can see the density. All of a sudden, there's a yellow piece of property there, which is ours, that changes from density. You've got development in both of those things right there, where you got Fox Den and all. Why is our piece of property low density and the one right next to it medium density? I mean, you're putting me out there in an island, and I'm medium density. You're saying you can't do this. And the way I'm looking at it is because I'm not a big developer, you put the big developer out there and let him have medium density, and I've got low density.
Jeff?
The roads I understand.
Jeff, would you address that?
Are we talking about Bernie Circle?
No. You go on over to the right, and that right in there.
Yeah.
All that area in there, all the way back to Packard. And I can see your density, and you feathering it in, like you say.
Yeah.
But still, you go back. Like Jeff said, this is a map. This is going to be the plan.
So our thinking was that's the area where the nursery is. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So our thinking was that if you're going to put high density, you typically want to not put it in the most interior part of an area because you're dragging more traffic through all of the neighboring existing subdivisions. In the areas down below Bernie Circle and Fordham, we have a road that connects directly out to Smith Road, and we could accomplish that traffic there without dragging it through the residential neighborhoods. So we didn't think that it would be appropriate to stick a higher density. We thought about it, and then at the end of the day decided it probably wasn't a great idea to put all of that density out there and then have that impact on the surrounding much lower density neighborhoods. So that was how we arrived at the designation.
I can understand how you arrived at it, but is it fair?
Is this not, again, the same question of it's your property and you can sell it or not sell it or develop it or not develop it at the time? Is that appropriate, Gary?
Well, of course, it's until it develops, none of the stuff will come into play. With the residential, you have the high density residential, the apartments, the townhomes, and of course you want to, as Jeff said, feather that density, going from out in the higher intensity uses on the outer parts. And I'll defer to Jeff on this as well, but I think even between the yellow shaded portions and the peach shaded portions, I think any development that comes in either one of those areas, it's going to have to be a case by case proposal. And again, this is just a general guide on how we want to ideally see this evolve. But all of this stuff is going to become a case by case as it develops type of issue.
At the time.
Yeah.
Then I would recommend taking it all to yellow, and then let everybody come before the board and work on equal terms of, hey, this is what I would like to do. But there again, you're setting a precedence, and when it is already this way, you can come down, but it's extremely hard to go up when you want to develop something. And I think we all know that.
Jeff, do you have any final words here?
Only as a general concept, we tried to put the higher density close to the busier, bigger roads. So we tended to keep them on the outskirts of interior properties. We had the luxury of having no idea who owned anything. And so it wasn't a question of fairness or were we discriminating against one person or another. We were, quite frankly, more concerned about the impact on that existing residential neighborhood, on Rustfield and Packard and all of those areas over there, that we would be channeling much higher traffic levels through them and necessitating bigger utilities lines to access higher density in the interior here, et cetera. So that was as a general principle we opted. That's an area that's got a fairly serious topographic constraints. There are a lot of rolling, fairly steep hills actually in that area around the nursery. So it's going to take some clustering. It's going to take some clustering anyway. And if somebody wanted to develop that and they wanted to feather densities and put a variety of different unit types, they could do that and still have an overall average using that concept. So there's a number of different tools. But the major point was we thought it was just too much of an impact. You can reach a different conclusion than we did, but that was how we arrived at it, just looking at it.
Okay, do I have any motions? Are we through our questions?
Sam, I'd like to offer you a little bit of information that I just kind of discovered as I'm kind of looking at this, looking at yours and looking at mine. But I was part of the steering committee that kind of helped guide this process. And my farm is actually a lower density on the new map that we're adopting tonight than your farm. So I can assure you that there was never any favorites ever played in this process. I think with the property that Doug Horn bought behind, or that Doug Horn's owned for a long time, behind the Ingalls, I think the difference with that property is that it would have direct access to Kingston Pike, which would then force his traffic, or the majority of his traffic, to go straight out onto a major arterial road, versus your farm. You and I both know there's just no easy way to get the traffic from your farm out to Kingston Pike. And so I can promise you and the citizens at home watching that this was a very thought-out, pragmatic, fair, unbiased process that we really spent a lot of time over the past year to try to get as much public input as we could. Granted, we only got 1% of the population, but we tried for more. We did a full-page ad in the Press Enterprise thinking, all right, well, let's get some folks excited about this. And we even tried to bribe them with milk and cookies. But we felt like at the end of the day, 1% was pretty typical of the rest of the nation. And if that's all that was going to participate in this process, then that's it. But I really take pride, and I think so does this board, and then so does the kind of the leadership steering committee that was part of this process, in trying to make this a real fair, exciting thing to look in the future, to say, let's get us a guiding map that we can look at to say, what are some of the great things that this town can have? And I don't have quite the density that I would like to have that would make my farm more valuable. You may not have the density that you would like to have. Mr. Allen may not have exactly what he would like to have. But at the end of the day, we wanted it to be fair and equitable for everybody, and not just about protecting businesses or protecting residents, but let's look at the big picture and how can we get enough input behind a plan that everybody can cohesively get behind and get excited and say, this is the plan, and we're going to try to follow the plan. Now, there's maybe mistakes in the plan. Mr. Allen may come back to us and say, you know what, I think I need mixed use, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to say, you know what, you're right in the middle of everything. Mixed use may be absolutely the most appropriate thing for your property. Sam, you may come back to us and say, you know what, I think I need condos on my property, so I'm going to need a higher density, and we can evaluate it based upon those merits. But when we start trying to go through each one of these tonight, I think it's a real challenge because we really haven't had a chance to kind of digest all the information. But most importantly, I want you to know that that there was never any favorites played. But if there was favorites played, I'd probably have like high-rise zoning on my property, but I don't. I have lower zoning than you do. Or not zoning. I'm talking about the colors. I'm the light tan and you're the yellow. But at the end of the day, I hope this is something that we can all be proud of and say, gosh, at least we're making some plans to go in the right direction.
I agree with you 100% there, and the record is developing big areas that we get green rather than small lots.
I agree. Absolutely.
We've covered all the questions I think that people had. Do I have a motion?
You can make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take 5 minutes to cover the next 12 items.
Yes. We're going to take a 5-minute recess here, and then we'll go on with the regular items on the agenda tonight. That's what I've been meaning to ask her that. And if
means my job is to get you.
I got you. Well, you're doing great.
Oh, thank you.
You got an endorsement. You got an endorsement already. Not good.
Got any comments?
Going to call the meeting back to order, please. Okay. Ruth, our microphones aren't working.
Hello.
Well, that's all that matters, so.
No, we've got like these, maybe 800, 900.
They're all in the
And we have all satellite offices that are mostly stable. Food Network is
Turnout at first was
primarily in
good.
New York.
The turnout was good.
So you're up there?
There was a computer.
Occasionally, yeah.
That was advertised.
Sorry.
Yeah, really.
Caffeine to stay up, Miss Betty.
Call
We had
in
y'all
if
on
you couldn't
mute,
make it
but
to the
it was on
meetings.
TV, that's how come the
Nowadays,
microphone.
3/4 of the world
Now, Ruth, here's my question. I've been sitting here all night going, okay, who's missing a limb?
Okay, we're all back here now. We're calling the meeting back to order. We're going to move on to discussion of item number 4. Discussion and public hearing on a request for a driveway on Smith Road classified as a major collector on the major road plans. Farragut Municipal Code, Title 16, Chapter 4, Driveways and Other Access Ways, Section 16-405, Permit Approval, and Section 16-406-1, Distance Requirement. B, distance between driveways for variance of driveway access to 531 Smith Road, Don and Angelina Dickey applicants.
In your packet, I included a copy of the survey of the site showing the proposed driveway location. I also included in the packet a copy of the aerial photograph showing the general area. Andover Place subdivision, Andover Boulevard, is located approximately 250 feet from the proposed driveway location and the existing driveway that's across the street. If you remember, just I guess a couple months ago, we reviewed a similar request on Allen Kirby Road. Smith Road, like Allen Kirby Road, is classified as a major collector, and the separation between driveways and from intersections per our regulations is 200 feet. As we well know, the traffic on Grigsby Chapel Road and Smith Road has gone up over time. Right now, we're probably at a low point just because of the construction that's at Everett Road. But this is a major road within the town of Farragut, and this is kind of what Jeff was talking about when he was talking about with the connectivity within our town. With regards to the access, like Old Stage Road, with some of the older lots from Old Stage Hills, these lots on Hickory Woods on the north side of the road have access directly to Smith Road rather than directly into their neighborhood. And not an ideal situation. If you recall, if you go down to McPhee Park when we redesigned the McPhee Road, we actually had to make special considerations for the northern portion of it because of the Caswell-Stewksbury subdivision with all the curb cuts. And so part of our ordinance is to minimize the number of curb cuts, and that when we do have curb cuts, you have lined up across the road. As we've talked about numerous times in the meetings, it's kind of like you can see the whites of the eyes of the person across the road from you, so you eliminate any potential conflict. It is a requirement in our access ordinance that anytime there is a residential driveway that accesses a collector or an arterial, it has to come before the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. In this particular case, it has to come before you also because of the requirement of there is a variance involved in this. The driveway shown minimizes the variances onto Smith Road. From the standpoint of the driveway would be located pretty much across the street from the existing driveway, but it maintains the distance from the Andover subdivision entrance. Staff does recommend approval of this as was submitted to the town.
Does the applicant or applicant's representative here have anything they want to say?
Yes, I'm Don Dickey, the applicant. I bought this property earlier this year. It was originally 2 lots. And there was an existing, there is an existing cut which we're currently using as a construction entrance right now. I guess I apologize. I bought a piece of property a few months ago and came before the commission and got a new re-subdivision. So we've now combined 1.5 acres and added another 0.8 acres to it for 2.3 acres. And I'm in the process, my wife and I are building a home. We just started excavation last week on it. I guess I apologize, I should have had the foresight when we presented the re-subdivision to ask for where the access was going to be, and I assumed that we would be able to use the existing cut, which is on the property now. And I'm going to have Chris Sharp, who's the survey engineer on the property, to show some drawings of what we're proposing. We did submit, because we were told we were not going to get a construction permit, we did submit to put our driveway on the far eastern side of the property, which would not make any sense to me as a homeowner at all. But and there also are some serious safety issues at that pulling out onto Smith Road, in my opinion, and we'll show you some photographs on that. We submitted that because we were told that we were not going to get a construction permit unless we submitted it that way to line up with the driveway on the other side. Actually, it does not line up with the driveway on the other side. I mean, technically, it may meet some minimum 26 feet if the other person had a 20-foot driveway, perhaps, but it does not line up with it. Maybe barely touches it if we extend it all the way to the far end of our property. What we're proposing is that we move it back toward the existing cut, to either be on the existing cut, which would be the center of my property. And as you're looking at that, my garage is the piece that sticks out on the upper left-hand corner, which is on the western side of the property. And the cut that's on the permit now is on the far eastern side, so I'd have to come in and go all the way across the property and come in the garage on the other side. But there are some major safety issues with that, and over this year I've been using the construction cut, which has a cut and is a built-up driveway now, and it works very well with visibility. Works great with this I'm in between the 2 stop signs. It works perfectly with the traffic flow. Where cars are coming out of Andover, or else they're stopped at Smith Road at Andover, and I can easily pull out. I believe it may be just under 200 feet, and I'm going to let Chris present the exact distances and what that looks like, and I'll pass out photographs of one photograph will be of of where it exists, where we'd like to put it, and what the visibility looks like. And the other photograph will show a utility pole, which really is blocks the vision of oncoming traffic. And as you're aware, that Smith Road is a very narrow road, and if you pull out right there, it is, in my opinion, it's a little bit dangerous, because you could pull in the other lane, or the other vehicle coming could could panic a little bit as a car pulled out on very quickly on a very narrow road. In other words, it's a tight fit, and then the visibility is very poor. Traffic is right on top of you. If I tried to pull out on the far eastern side of that property, I'll show you a photograph of that, and I'll let Chris
Can
present.
I interject? Since the staff hasn't evaluated this, and Daryl Smith had a family emergency and couldn't be here this evening, I request that this be postponed so Daryl has an opportunity to review this, because this is kind of not what was submitted of us for review.
Does this hold him up?
No.
Mr. Dickey, would you be all right if we could digest this information and put you on the agenda for next month?
Okay.
I think that would allow the staff to kind of get their arms around, and then maybe if we need to amend the variance request to another location. And personally, I see the old driveway right in the middle of the properties, but again, we need to evaluate the line of sight and so forth. But it seems like that might make sense. I understand that either which way you're going to probably have a variance.
Yeah.
But I also see that you also had two properties that were probably both eligible for curb cuts, and now you only have one property and you just need one curb cut. So you're actually improving the overall situation what was there before. We just need to get our arms around it. So if that's all right with the Planning Commission and the chairwoman.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry. Chris Sharp, Urban Engineering. Procedurally, what do we need to do? We need to resubmit an amended site plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Because what we evaluated with what was submitted to us.
Okay.
Move to defer.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a site plan amendment to the Thornton Center, Genesis Center, 10,910 Kingston Pike, Suite 103, to expand the existing building 1.33 acres, Zone C-1. Dan Brewer, Ingram Fuller Architects Incorporated, applicant.
This is actually a very minor site plan. Unfortunately for Mr. Brewer, he actually enjoyed the discussion on the land use plan. And some of you are familiar, the Thornton Center, now called the Genesis Center, is the center that is located in front of the Parkview West Assisted Living. This came through together jointly a few years ago. It is located toward the east end of town. And the dark area that's on the screen is the addition.
Did we have the lights turned back on?
The overhead lights?
Those up there, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The addition is 6 feet by 33 feet, I believe, Dan?
Yes.
And the addition is going to be constructed so as it blends in with the architectural materials of the existing building, and that kind of gives you an aerial view of where the addition will take place. Staff is recommending approval of the site plan, subject to including the revised calculated fire flow information on the title page, that it's part of the document itself and meeting all town requirements. And I don't know if Dan has any. You might give a little blurb for the applicant so they can get some publicity for it.
Well, I'll do that. I'm Dan Brewer, and the architect for the project. And first of all, representing the owner, both the owner and I agree with all the staff comments that have been made. And one issue, the second issue, had to do with a dumpster that is illegally parked on the back of the site, and I've had assurances from both the owner and the tenant agree to have that removed if it's not been already by today. So that should remove all the issues. This is a very great tenant for the town of Farragut. It's Mr. Bo Townsend. He's a pediatric dentist. He already has an active practice in Knoxville. He's just a terrific individual, and it will be a great asset for the town of Farragut. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions or comments? To have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a site plan for Parkside Retail Center located on the south side of Parkside Drive between JCPenney and Tennessee State Bank. A portion of the parcel 9191.06, tax map 133.466 acres, zone C-1. The center at Parkside LLC applicant.
This site's fairly familiar to you because you just reviewed a rezoning request for the property. This is for the eastern portion of the property that is next to the Tennessee Bank. The shared access easement will be the access to this parcel. That is where the traffic signal is located, and it will access the parcel directly across the access going into the Tennessee State Bank. This property will be subdivided out because it's just a 2-lot subdivision. That subdivision will actually be reviewed at the staff level rather than at the Planning Commission level. But you can see on this overview how it connects in with the next site plan that you will be reviewing. And this is the eastern portion of the property, and this is what the building is proposed to look like. At your places is the staff recommendation. We are recommending approval of this site plan subject to addressing the items listed. There's 16 items, the 16th item being meet all town requirements. I know the numbers don't quite coordinate with the letter that Brad received just because we had some duplicate comments just from so that if he had a question, he knows he can ask more than one staff person the question. But basically, just including information with regards to fire flow, approval from First Utility District, address certification, just doing some minor changes to the site plan.
Does the applicant have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am. We don't have any questions or comments with the...
Are you all right with these items?
Yeah, and Ruth and I have talked. They'll be addressed when the construction drawings come in. They'll be taken care of either with them or prior to, and she'll have all that information.
Do you have any proposed tenants?
I don't. I'm the civil engineer for the project and don't have anything to do with the leasing. So.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Have a motion?
Move to approve, subject to the staff's recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for the Knoxville TVA Employees Credit Union located on the south side of Parkside Drive between JCPenney and Tennessee State Bank. A portion of the parcel 191.06, tax map 130, 1.5 acres, zone C1, Knoxville TVA Employees Credit Union applicant.
Again, this is quite familiar. It's on the other side of the piece of property that we just discussed, and this is on the west side. This is next to the JCPenney where their loading area is. This will access the shared access easement. They do have an cross-access across, as we require of everybody on Parkside Drive, so they will have access to the traffic signal. This is also where the walking trail is on the far west side. You can see the walking trail on the overhead. And at your places at the staff recommendation, staff is recommending approval of the site plan subject to addressing items 1 through 16. Again, the last one being meeting all town requirements. And the numbers are slightly different. I know from talking with Brad that they actually have an issue with one of the items, which is really up for your discussion, and that is on your comments. It's item number 7. staff is requesting that they tighten the radiuses of their site plan at various locations. And I wish I could show you this. Let's give this another shot.
How tight is tight, right?
Pardon?
How tight is tight, right?
Well, basically, these are pretty rounded radiuses. And when you look at what we're asking for is something that's more comparable to the radiuses on this site plan. I think I'm just going to show you on the overhead so I can point it out. Site plan that you just reviewed, what we're talking about is that the turn radius coming outside the driveway, for example, is tighter. Right here it's tighter. Right around here it's tighter. And what that does is whenever you have a tighter turning radius, it slows traffic down because you can't take that wide sweeping turn as you're making the turn. And so what we are, I'll get to the page. When you look at this site plan, the radiuses are much more broad. Some of our concerns with this radius on here is that because they're at conflict with pedestrian crossings, for example, this one right here, that you're going to have a pedestrian crossing here. In essence, if you're coming around, you can just kind of do a very sweeping and kind of go at a much faster pace, whereas you have a tighter radius, it does slow people down. The same with this area over here, is that you have people that are going to be walking over in this direction, that if you're coming around, you're maintaining the speed as you're coming around here, and there's a sidewalk crossing right here. And if you have to slow down to make the turn, you maintain your slower speed. What our concern is with that is that whenever you have a very sweeping radius, you don't keep vehicles slow. And there's one thing that I know that Captain Palmer hears on a regular basis is the problems with speeding in town. You don't really think about it being internally to a site. But one thing we have learned is that keeping the tighter radiuses does help. The applicant, that is the one item on the list that is up for your all's discretion as to what your thoughts are on it. And then I'll turn it over to Brad so he can explain their perspective.
And Ruth is correct.
Let us know who you are again.
Pardon me. Brad Salisbury, Cannon and Cannon. And I've got Kelly Hicks with Michael Brady here with me as well. Ruth is correct in that a tighter radius definitely slows the traffic down. And we recognize that. And I guess let's just start in the screen in front of me, it'd be the left-hand side, but the entrance to the other property. Got no problem with going ahead and tightening that radius up. Yes, and we'll make it similar to what's right there already. Part of the reasons for the wider radius is it's really twofold. Number one is to protect the landscaping on the front portion here as they're turning into the drive-through. TVA Credit Union has had quite a few folks that jump over the top of the curb and go through the landscaping trying to get into those drive-throughs. So what they've done is open that radius up to allow that. What we've done to help offset the speed is the two black bars that are there are speed bumps. They're to slow the traffic down and keep them from whipping around that corner, just like Ruth had said. The front corner in the building there, that's really a different animal. That radius was opened up because of similar problems that they've had at other bank franchises where it has been tightened up, and it causes the car coming out to make a wide sweeping turn if they're making the left-hand turn coming out. And they've had some fender benders there, and yes, that one right there. Oh, I thought you were talking about that one.
Make sure I got that right, so I remember. It's been a couple days since I've looked at it.
I see this as a real similar arrangement as the bank and the Einstein Bagels, and I can see what's happened in that situation. What they've done is a lot of the traffic going over to the bagel shop is cutting through the bank because that's the way you got to get there from Parkside. So what they've done is put some speed bumps in, which are less than ideal, but they do work. And I don't like driving over them, but I do slow down going over them. And I also can fully kind of understand and appreciate the issue of people driving through your flower beds because we deal with that. Matter of fact, we actually put big boulders in our flower beds a lot of times, so if somebody's going to drive through them, they're going to tear their car up driving through my flower bed. They tear the flower bed and tear their car up and usually leave me some spare parts.
Well, there's a lot of boulders that we haven't found.
But my thought is the speed bumps seem to work fine over at the First Tennessee Bank and the Einstein. I think the speed bumps, if the applicant is willing to put the speed bumps in here, I think they'd be completely appropriate here.
I guess I didn't realize those were speed bumps. Actually, I thought they were just changing paving markings.
Oh, I'm sorry for not being clear.
These are actually speed bumps that are higher elevation than the rest of the parking lot.
They're speed bumps.
Speed bumps.
Little shorter than rocks, probably, but
they will not tear your car up as badly as boulders.
Now, I don't put them in the road or the driveways. I just put them in the flower beds.
Purely a decorative item.
Yes, it's supposed to be decorative. I'm on the record.
Does that work?
Well, basically, if they're, is there a detail of the speed bump in there? Okay, well then obviously I'm not the one who looked at the detail speed.
It's a very simple misunderstanding.
But if you tighten up that east one and then leave the other ones, you're good with that? Okay.
And all the other items?
Yes, ma'am. Similar to the previous application, these will be cleaned up as the construction drawings come in. We just really aren't at that stage yet with some of those items, and we'll address them accordingly.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'll offer a motion of approval subject to installing the speed bumps and changing the radius of the east island to the town-specified radius, but leaving the western island, it's not really an island, but the radius on that parking lot landscape bed as is.
Do we need to?
And 1 through 16.
Yeah, and the subject tos.
Yeah.
1 through 16.
Does a number need to be in here with the?
I will change number 7 to reflect what Noah just said.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
The next few items are items that we have discussed in workshop before. Is that correct, Ruth?
Yes, we have.
Okay, discussion and item number 8, discussion and public hearing on an amendment to the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 4, to create a grand opening special events permit section.
Let me regroup for a sec here. Oh, by the way, that's what the building will look like. That is their prototype. Just didn't get to that part. In your packet was a copy of Resolution PC 1213 and Ordinance 1219. And we reviewed this fairly extensively at the last meeting. with the, I went one too far, didn't I? I'm sorry. We reviewed this fairly extensively at the last meeting with regards to the purpose of this ordinance is to offer businesses, commercial entities, an extra avenue for grand openings, because particularly our smaller businesses, is the expense of going out and buying a sign that says grand opening, is just one more expense, because when you're starting a new business, it seems to be you get nickeled and dimed to death. That's one thing after another coming up that you think you have everything planned ahead of what it is that you'll be needing to spend money on, but it never seems to work out that way. But part of this also is to brand the grand opening sign from the standpoint of, if, as a resident of the town of Farragut, if I see the blue and white sign and it's like, oh, there's another business open, I'm going to have to check it out, that you'll begin to recognize that, so that it gives kind of an added push, and that to let people know, hey, there's something going on in this center or at this building or whatever, that there's a new business there. Allison Souza is here with the Farragut Business Alliance. She may have comments on this. I'll pass it on to her.
Good evening. Allison Souza with the Farragut Business Alliance. I've spoken with you before about this. We are in full support of this. We workshopped it with several of our members, and we prefer to look at it as less of an ordinance and more of a grand opening program, really giving new businesses the opportunity to leverage that one-time boom, that one-time exposure they have in the midst of their grand opening. Anything we can do to support it, we'll be glad to do.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, how much is the deposit?
That will be determined by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen as part of every year they pass a resolution. Staff will suggest that the deposit is comparable to the cost of the sign. We have not priced the signs out, so once the ordinance is passed, we will be going out and purchasing the signs. The idea being that if, let's say a business, rents the sign, because in essence, what there will be a fee with it. But then the deposit is to protect the town, so that if we have to go out and buy a bunch of signs, that we have the money. But if the signs are returned to us, everything, they get their money back.
Does the town take them out and pick them up?
No, we would actually leave that up to the applicant. We don't
If they
have
don't bring them in?
Pardon?
If they don't bring them in, does
Then
the
they
town
don't
go
get
pick
their
'em up?
security deposit back.
Is that what?
They don't get their security deposit
But
back.
they keep the sign.
So I would guess that'll be an incentive to bring it back.
Are there restrictions where the signs go with respect to the front of their building?
We did not at the last meeting, if you remember, when we were talking about that. We opted not to put that restriction in. We just went with that. They were allowed to have the 32 square foot sign. In addition, they could have their second 20 square foot sign, and that if they had, like for example, if they fronted on two streets, that they could have the signs, but they had to be 150 feet apart. We did not specify that it had to be located near their entrance or anything like that.
Because I was thinking about specifically behind Walgreens, that area back there with the mellow mushroom. Like, can they bring it out to the road? Does it have to stay back?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, the only requirement is that it's set back from the 20 feet from the street edge, and then 10 feet from entrance driveways.
Which is the same as the special events
Right.
sign.
Okay, great.
Any other questions and comments?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9, discussion, public hearing on amendment to the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 4, Section 13, outdoor site lighting to establish wall-mounted light heights and require glare shields.
This, like the last one, we talked about this. Actually, 2 separate meetings we talked about this with regards to the this was brought before you initially because of the discussion on the new business district 4-story ordinance, and then we added, because of the issues that we're dealing with out at Publix, the requirement that exterior glare shields be added to light poles whenever they're adjacent to residential areas, that there's a change of elevation where that protect the property owners. I actually got an email from Publix representatives this afternoon that they have not had an opportunity to go to check out Costco's, but they have disengaged their pole lights because they immediately got complaints about them. And they are going out and checking out the Costco, and they're going to be voluntarily adding those glare shields, which we're very appreciative of, because it really is very bright at the neighbor's property, even though you have the distance. And so this ordinance also addresses that issue, so that when somebody comes in, they know on the front end that that will be a requirement, rather than kind of at the tail end of the project trying to have to figure out how to address it. I included in the packet the changes, and then the ordinance reflects those changes. So staff recommends approval of resolution PC 1214, which recommends approval of ordinance 1220 to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Anyone having questions or comments?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 10, discussion public hearing on amendment to the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 4, Section I, accessory structures, to require HVAC screening to be architecturally compatible and to rename section to accessory structures and uses.
Again, we talked about this at the last meeting, and this was brought before you initially because we were just going to change the heading of accessory structures to accessory structures and uses. And then as we were going through the BD4 district discussions, it was decided that it was desired to have the screening to be architecturally compatible with the buildings that the HVAC unit is servicing. One of the things that did change from the last time we talked about this is before I had that it was compatible with the principal building. Well, if there's two buildings on the lot and they look kind of different, you want it to be compatible with the building of which it's servicing, you know, that's fixed to, so, or that it's adjacent to, or whichever. So I said such screening shall be architecturally compatible with the building the units are serving. But in your packet is a copy of Resolution PC 1215, which does recommend approval of Ordinance 1221.
Any questions or comments?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 3, Section 16, to create a new four-story business zoning district entitled Business District 4 Stories, BD-4, Myers Brothers Holding applicant.
We've talked about this a few times, and by the very fact we're having a few less people here than we have the last couple meetings, we might be, hopefully we've honed in to what we are trying to accomplish with this district. Basically, this business district is more restrictive than the existing C1 district, or than the C1 district, in that the uses are more restrictive. Does limit exterior uses like outdoor sales and storage and that sort of thing. And the trade-off is that it can be a four-story building. However, there are architectural requirements from the standpoint that it is tied into the municipal code with the idea that you have the cornice and you have brick construction and that sort of thing. So I think we've gone over this quite a bit, but I would like to point out, because at the last meeting we had talked about the with regards to buffer strip and setbacks, that is on page 3, number 2, side and rear yards. Says all buildings shall be set back a minimum of 20 feet. When the abutting property is zoned residential or agricultural, buildings shall be set back a minimum of 100 feet. That's what you reviewed at the last meeting. And then after our discussion, I had it, when the abutting property is zoned buffer district and the property immediately adjacent to such buffer district is zoned residential or agricultural, buildings shall be set back a minimum of 100 feet from the residentially or agriculturally zoned land. So that way, if there's a buffer strip in there, that is a zoned buffer zone rather than a buffer strip, I used the wrong term, you maintain that 100-foot setback. So it remains consistent. The other change that we talked about at the last meeting was on page 5, number 7, under parking. And we had talked about screening the parking lots from adjacent roadways, and we opted not to be very prescriptive about what they have to landscape or the berm or anything like that. They basically leave it up to the applicant and how they would accomplish this, but it was agreed that the 60% of the total parking lot would need to be screened. And so I added, it states, when a parking lot is constructed adjacent to a front property line, a berm shall be constructed or landscaping shall be planted so as to limit the viewability of the parking lot from the street. A minimum of 60% of the total parking lot length adjacent to the front property line shall be screened from view with the berm or landscaping. So that is more prescriptive. It establishes the 60%. But again, it doesn't state what kind of landscaping, how you landscape, or the berm. It does give them the option with that. I hope that kind of accomplished what we talked about at the last meeting with our discussions with that. But attached is resolution PC 1216 and ordinance 1222, and staff does recommend approval of resolution PC 1216.
Does the applicant have any comments?
Noah Myers, 503 Concord Road. I'm here representing the applicant and not representing my role as a planning commissioner. We do not have any comments, but we are more than happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Only comment I'd like to make is I really think this is a tremendous opportunity for our community, and I applaud the Meyer brothers for bringing this to us and giving us the opportunity to discuss this, because it's going to be one of those moments, I believe, that's going to continue to set Farragut apart and raise the bar a little bit. So thank you for that.
And I think the starting point to where we're at in this thing has been pretty dramatic to get us to something I think is kind of exciting to see how it works.
I believe so. Thank you.
I would make a motion for approval.
The resolution PC 1216.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Move on to 12.
I'm going to make a note that Noah has abstained.
Yes, I was going to say I officially abstain.
Discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone parcel 63, tax map 151, located on the southwest corner of Kingston Pike and Way Station Trail, part of the Renaissance development, from C1 to Business District, 4-story BD-4. Myers Brothers Holding applicant.
This actually is the next step of this. We have an ordinance created now, actually kind of in the process, and this is for the rezoning of the property that's at the Old Stage Hills entrance on Kingston Pike. I know some of the concerns that were raised by the neighborhood are really issues more at the time of site plan, and they would be discussed whether this remains C1 or BD4. Their issues weren't really with the zoning district itself. I think that after the first meeting, some of their concerns were addressed with regards to the neighborhood because of the additional setback. I know I have talked to several people in the neighborhood, and as I've explained to them, that this actually is more restrictive, and with the exception of the building height, is more restrictive than what's currently there. They have expressed that this was a good thing in that, from their perspective. Staff does recommend approval of resolution PC 1217, which recommends approval of ordinance 1223 and the rezoning to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Questions or comments? You have anything as the applicant?
No, ma'am. We're excited about this opportunity. We think it'll be something new and innovative for the town.
I'll make a motion to move to approve Resolution PC 1217.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Was that Ed? You made so, okay.
And abstain from me, Ruth.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Is this the process now as far as until you come with your plans?
A site plan should be hopefully sometime early in the spring.
Item number 13, discussion on a request to rezone parcel 6, tax map 151, located on the west side of North Watt Road, approximately 600 feet north of Harrison Road, from C1 to R1 and R4. Scott Davis, applicant. Ruth, this is for discussion purposes only.
Yes, and this is your first test that you're going to be looking at for taking action on. And appreciate Scott's patience this evening. I really couldn't give him a time frame as to when to come to this evening, but the request before you, this is the property that is located on North Watt Road, kind of at the very end of the town limits. The town limits is actually just a few hundred feet to the north of this property. It is currently zoned commercial. I do not know the history of why this property was zoned commercial. I don't know if this was what it was zoned originally when the town adopted the county zoning or not. I couldn't find anything with regards to that. But it is zoned commercial. It is one of the few tracks in town that actually does go into Loudoun County. So sometimes there's confusion that because part of it's in Loudoun County that we deal with Loudoun County. Only when he records a plat, it has to be recorded at both counties, but it is still solely under the authority of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission. As you can see by this zoning map, the property is surrounded by agricultural zoning. And when I go back to the aerial photograph, you can see that it's not just surrounded by agricultural zoning, it's pretty much surrounded by agricultural uses. The property was farmed in the past, mostly hayfield at this point in time, but has overgrown in the last several years. You can see the line fences have the trees on. They're going through this rezoning at this point in time because the back corner of the property, Scott has a buyer for it for a large lot, single-family residential. And when you look over into Loudoun County, you can see that that use is very compatible with what's there off of Harrison Road currently. If you've not ever been on Harrison Road, it's quite a narrow road. And I had miswrote in your packet about this, and that in reality the subdivision plat can't be recorded until after the rezoning is finalized, not before the rezoning is finalized. I caught it after I'd put your packets together and distributed. I realized I had I wrote that incorrectly. The reason for that being is because within our C1 General Commercial District, we require that access be from a road that meets minimum requirements, or is from an arterial or collector, and Harrison Road does not meet those minimum requirements, and that and so once the property is rezoned, they will be going through the subdivision process to subdivide out the portion that is they're requesting to be R1. Let's see here if that is the plat that they'll be looking at. The lot 2 is what they are requesting to be zoned R1. When we initially met with Scott, he had talked about rezoning the whole property R1, and we suggested, because it would be compatible with the plan that you all reviewed and approved earlier this evening, to keep the rest of it to rather than go commercial, but to go to R4 kind of as a stepping stone, because that area is designated as a higher density residential on the plan. They don't have any plans yet for Lot 1 or anything like that, but he was agreeable to taking that step with going with the R4 district. I don't know, Scott, do you have anything to add? Or
Scott, I'd like to point something out that just you may want to digest between this meeting and next week's meeting. But
Scott, tell us who you are and where
Yes, ma'am. Scott Davis, P.O. Box 11315, Knoxville, Tennessee.
One of the things that I'm somewhat familiar with this property. I have a broker in my office that had helped you try to market this over the years, and so topographically the property lays really well. You have utilities right there on Watt Road. Watt Road's a major arterial. You have an unusual piece of property that is currently zoned C1. Taking this step to R4 is going to make a real challenge for you if you ever wanted to go back to C1.
Correct.
And I want you to be able to understand that if you ever wanted to go back, and based upon the comprehensive plan that we're adopting, it probably would be almost impossible to go back to C1. Even though the property may not be ripe for traditional strip mall development, there may be other uses on there that C1 would allow you that the R4 is not going to allow you. And I guess one of the thoughts that if it was me, and it's not me, it's your property, but is maybe you zone the back half residential and leave your C1, because you do have something that is unique, albeit it is surrounded by agricultural property, but it is on Watt Road, which is an interchange road. It is classified as a major arterial. There are some issues with the width of the road, being that I think the center turn lane is pretty much diminished by the time it gets up to you. But you're taking a step backwards that's going to be almost impossible to fix in the future. And if R4 is the way you want to go for it. But I guess I just want you to know that there is some risk in the direction you're going. If I felt like that this was absolutely incompatible and that we mistakenly zoned it to C1 some years ago, that would be different. I don't necessarily think it was mistakenly zoned. Is it a little unusual that it's C1 right there? Yeah, probably. Is it unusual in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? No, probably not. Would apartments go there? Great. Or townhouses? Yes. But just keep that in mind, that once you make this step at the next meeting and eventually onto the Board of Mayor and Alderman with 2 votes, it's going to be tough to go back.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate that, and I really do. I appreciate your interest and your understanding of that. And we've owned the property for probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years, and probably 80% of the interest thus far has been for residential purpose, and we hadn't sold it in 6 or 7 years, so that may be a better route to go.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with residential. We are a residential town, and it makes a ton of sense. I just hate to prohibit a use that you're allowed today that you won't be allowed in the future.
Yes, sir, and I truly appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? How will we proceed next time on this?
We'll vote for Scott's request of the R1 and the R4.
And when is that meeting, please?
It'll be at the third Thursday in January when they'll vote on your request, and then it'll go on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the February board meetings. I think it's January 17th, but
okay.
Don't hold me to that on that one. I think it is the 17th that'll be voted on. And you'll be at the beginning of the agenda, I promise.
You deserve that. After tonight, we tortured you.
Thank you all. Have a great holiday. See you.
Thank you. Item number 14, discussion of request to amend the text of the Farragut Municipal Code, Title 9, Chapter 4, Sign Ordinance, Section 9-406, to allow signage on a wall to exceed a 1-to-1 ratio. Costco's Wholesale Corporation applicant.
And Jeff has also been very patient this evening. Before you is a request from Costco to amend our sign ordinance. We have talked about our sign ordinance fairly recently, fairly extensively. In fact, we had a couple of workshop sessions on it before we moved and took action on the request, and that was the 5-story building on Parkside Drive requesting additional signage. This request is similar to that request in that they are requesting a different way of how we calculate our signage. I did not include any pictures this evening because this request does not just affect the Costco. This is an across-the-board request, and I did not feel it was appropriate at this point in time because we're kind of in the general phases of it. And unlike the other discussion we had with the 5-story building, there's a lot of property zone C1 in the town, whereas when we were talking about the 5-story building, that was pretty much it. So it was much more site-specific than this particular request. I'm sure all of you know where the Costco is. I'm pretty sure everybody else in town does too, based on the traffic patterns of late, which we're very happy to see. But how we measure our signage is a 1-to-1 ratio, and this has been the foundation of our sign ordinance from our first sign ordinance forward. And the whole intent behind that is that it keeps our signage proportional to the building on which it is, wall on which it is mounted. If you go out to the Costco, the building is angled, and so the angled wall, the sign that is mounted on that is based on the size of that wall on which it is mounted. We have dealt with this in other businesses, Mexico, down there on West End, for example. I think it was a previous tenant, but again, it was a situation where you have an angled wall and the sign was proportional to that wall on which it was mounted, and we've had this in several other instances here in town. The Costco is actually looking for a larger sign on that angled wall, and I included in the staff write-up the staff's position on this, and that we do not support this request because, in essence, what they're asking for is a 2.5-to-1 ratio on that particular wall. That is a very significant deviation from what our regulations currently are and from what they have always been in that respect. Costco does have the opportunity for a much larger wall sign facing Level Road in lieu of that sign that's on the angled building elevation. So this is just a preference of theirs to put it on a different wall. They could have a 280 square foot sign facing Level Road. Now, if you have come up Level Road toward the Costco, you probably are very well aware that it is not very visible from Level Road because of the elevation change. And also with the angled sign, if you are sitting at the intersection of Kingston Pike and Level Road on Kingston Pike, you don't even really see the Costco because of the Walgreens. There's currently an out parcel that fronts on Level Road that is vacant. When that is built, the building will become even more tucked behind the businesses and not very visible. But with regards to why I'm kind of moving into the next comment is that in terms of identifying Costco, a ground-mounted sign would much better serve their needs as you are southbound on Level Road, because you could see that at the traffic signal as you're approaching it before you could see the building. This would be comparable to what Kroger's has done, what Ingles has done, and identified their establishment that way. With regards to when we were talking about the 5-story building, one of the issues that we discussed is that they did not exhaust all of their options under our current ordinance, and that's basically what we're dealing with as a similar in that respect, in that they do not have a ground-mounted sign. Now, Jeff, I know, will come up here and explain that Costco does not like ground-mounted signs, but we got to know the contractor fairly well during this project, as we do with every large project, because they're here for an extended period of time, and they may not prefer it, but they have put ground-mounted signs in jurisdictions that actually require it, or that they don't have other options. From Kingston Pike frontage, you see the large sign that faces Kingston Pike. With the terrain, you can see that very well. The sign that's actually on the angled portion of the building really serves you when you're in the parking lot. It is not serving Level Road or Kingston Pike. So having a larger sign on that elevation really doesn't accomplish anything. And the whole purpose of signage is really for wayfinding, so that you can find it. And like I said earlier, I'm very happy to report that apparently a lot of people are finding Costco. But in essence, we feel that a ground-mounted sign, since it is of an avenue that the town currently has in our ordinance, actually serves a better purpose for wayfinding when you're on level road. I think on Kingston Pike there is no difficulty, although they would be allowed to have ground-mounted signs on Kingston Pike also, but because of their road frontage. But this was presented to the Visual Resources Review Board, and they concurred that they did not support the request that was before them. I will say that I took verbatim their ideas that I talked to Mark about it, he explained it to me. I'm not sure I 100% understood it, but it's like if they took the whole wall into consideration, that would be one option to go with. That concerns me because the fact that it was fairly complicated, and I'm not really sure it really was addressing the issue that would have wide-scale ramifications in town. Ultimately, as I said, signage is for wayfinding purposes, and in addition, this request is not consistent with the town's adopted strategic plan. This is the same section that we talked about when we talked about the wall signs for the 5-story building, is that Goal 4, Objective 6 states provides for more beautiful corridors and development, signs, storefronts, and landscaping. Lessening visual clutter and keeping the sign size proportional in size to the wall on which they are mounted would seem to be consistent with this objective that is stated in the strategic plan.
I don't agree with changing it. I like the one-to-one.
Ruth, talk just a little bit more about the ramifications over all the town.
The ordinance that, when we reviewed the 5-story building, was written specifically for that zoning district, the 015 zoning district. And we did express at that time our concerns that given we weren't sure where the land use plan was going, that we may see more land zoned 015, but currently we didn't. In this particular case, the Costco property is zoned C1 General Commercial District, which includes pretty much all the commercial land on Kingston Pike and some on Parkside Drive. And so we don't know what kind of buildings we will see constructed in the future, so in that respect it is unique in that area, but at the same time it has the potential of having a much more impact and the idea that deviating from the 1-to-1 ratio, that you always talk about, well, if we do this now, how do we say no for the next one? Because we have always stood firm on the 1-to-1 ratio.
So it would open up to anybody who...
Every request and everything is always open up, but this request is inconsistent with past practices. It is inconsistent with the adopted strategic plan, and so, you know, in that respect, it's, you know, yeah, it does create a little different scenario.
Furthermore, there appears to be other suitable options that haven't been explored. Listed in here.
Mm-hmm. Does the applicant have any questions or comments?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Rutter. I'm a real estate development director for Costco. And basically, when we look at this, we're not asking to add additional signs, nor are we asking to add square footage. All we're asking is that that area in the skewed section, we'd be allowed to have a larger sign. The scale of a sign on the side of a 300-foot-long building where we could have a 300-square-foot sign looks very appropriate. But we've got a 48-foot wide area in front. We're allowed a 48-square-foot sign. typically Costco has a 125 square foot sign. During the meeting with the Visual Resources Review Board, we kind of batted around what would work. And as Ruth said, part of it was to take and include that angled section along with the one side that you're not going to put a sign on, and then maybe have a percentage of that. And they've their suggested percentage ended up giving us a 98 square foot sign versus a 48 square foot sign. And I do have a drawing, and I know this just shows how this would affect a Costco. It shows how it is now, and then it shows how it would be if we did get a 98 square foot. Now, I don't know how they ended up, talking about what percentage or if they were going to include that whole side there. But the fact is, if we had a 100 or 98 square foot sign here, it would still be 200 square foot less than what we would be allowed on the building. So I don't know if you guys want to take a look at these.
I can put it on the overhead, Jeff. I just flipped that on.
That's how it is today, with the 48 square foot sign. And that would be a 98 square foot sign. And again, we would forego having a 300 square foot sign on the long side of the building. The 48 foot sign just looks out of scale here, because when you're looking at that smaller sign, you're still getting not just the straight on view, you're getting the side view. And that's basically our whole point. It's not, obviously, it's not going to bring more business in. We're doing great business now. But what it's going to do is it's going to make the building look better with a properly scaled sign at the entrance to the building.
Any questions or comments?
I thought the entrance was on.
Betty, can you talk into the microphone, please?
You said that's the entrance to the building.
Yes, ma'am.
I thought the main entrance was on Kingston Pike.
Well, it actually faces the intersection.
Oh, okay.
Kind of that 45-degree angle that's kind of takes into account both Lovell Road and Kingston Pike.
It faces the intersection, but because the Walgreens is there and the elevation change, you can't see it from the intersection at all. So that's why it primarily serves once you're in the parking lot, that sign does.
Can you show those pictures again? Is that the big or the small?
That's the big one.
Big.
The big one.
I think Jeff, you played with the scale here to make this one look really small. You got it set really far back.
Basically, you know what I did? We had these at the last meeting, and I told my architect to pretty them up, and he just gives me one. So I did notice that when I was looking at them.
But it does look smaller because it really is, because the building is set far back from the road. To me, it does look, I think it looks really small, personally.
The sign, on this elevation, the sign really isn't visible from the road.
Right.
It's visible from the parking lot.
And honestly, I remember seeing it thinking it was kind of small. For good or for bad, I just
Sure.
thought it was small.
This is what's there today, correct? What we're looking
Yes, yes.
For the next meeting, if you'd like, I can take pictures and show them from, take pictures from Kingston Pike, from the intersection, and show kind of the live pictures.
I have those, and I can send those to you. I've got them digital, and then if you want to go out and take some more, that's fine.
Actually, looking at it, it's hard to understand what that sign does for you all, because you're in Kingston Pike, you see the big sign on the side of the building.
Right.
And I had to actually look for the sign to see it. I didn't know, because from Kingston Pike, you can't really see it off Lovell Road.
Yeah, and to address the pylon sign or road
What it's
sign.
accomplishing.
Yeah.
Well, don't call it a pylon sign, Jeff. It's
Okay.
a monument sign.
A monument sign. Costco just has traditionally not done that. It was always seen as an added cost. Our building was our sign. Eventually, it's a destination. I mean, a brand new building now, but we're members only, and the members are going to find us. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't like the monument signs out on the road. Again, it's
There's a sign on the road now in front of the auto zone.
Yeah.
And pretty much on all the intersections, seems like on every.
Yeah.
As soon as you get outside the town of Farragut, we got the now open signs.
the little ones. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they got the illegal signs, but they're not.
Are those illegal?
They're not illegal in the city of Knox.
They're illegal in the county too, but they just don't have the staff to pull them up.
Oh. I don't have anything to do with those. Just the ones on the building.
Personally, what I have concern about is we have a fundamental way that we have measured for signs for a lot of years. Yeah. And I understand scale-wise, you got a big building, you should be eligible for a big sign. But the problem is we're going backwards to try to recalculate your footage in some other way that historically we've not calculated footage that way based upon this plane of the facade of the building. And so I feel for you. I kind of understand aesthetically maybe a big sign would be appropriate. I think the little sign works fine. I'm a Costco member. I was there today, and I find you, and I know exactly where the entrance is.
And you said your building is your sign, so you don't really need that at all.
Right. We want it to look nice, though. I think that's it's an aesthetic thing for us.
Now, if you would have built us a brick building, maybe I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
You know, your comprehensive plan, I think if they had something in there about...
Well, actually, early on, I'll tease you. Actually, early on, we actually mentioned when you guys are coming through site plan, what do you think about brick? And the response was, well, we don't have to do brick. We're not doing brick. And you don't have to do brick in the town of Farragut. That may change someday.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Is there a Costco sign in front of the gas station?
I believe there's a Costco sign on the canopy.
On the canopy, yeah.
But that's what we're saying is that it would be more effective to put a Costco sign, ground-mounted sign, out there by the traffic signal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then say under the gas prices, say members only, so that because we've actually, I wish I could play the phone message that we got, and it was kind of like, and then at the end of this very, let's just say non-friendly voicemail, we got this, and Merry Christmas to you.
Sounds like Prescott.
They were very upset because apparently they had gone into Costco, and Costco doesn't have their gas prices posted out at the road like Kroger's and Ingles. Yeah. And they went in and they talked to somebody, and they said, well, how come you don't have your gas prices posted? And whoever they talked to told them it was because the town of Farragut wouldn't let them. And so that person proceeded to explain what they thought of us for not letting them.
Well,
post it. So
maybe you do it
everybody needs
only.
To
you don't advertise your gas price.
We have a sandwich board sign. We found out that was illegal, but we're going to come back in after we get done with this one thing at a time and get a regular mounted sign with the gasoline prices on it that will be at the entrance to the gas station. But you're correct. We don't put that at the road. It's usually at the entrance to the gas station because it is members only, and we're not advertising our prices. Public.
But you might get people to join if they see those gas prices and you say members only. They're going to say, "Wow, I'm going there."
Just a footnote: in Collierville, Tennessee, there are no prices posted that you can see. Right?
Anywhere. And that might be.
You mean on any gas station, not just Costco.
Everyone.
Wow.
Yeah. See, we're not so bad. And just remember, Boca Raton.
I have.
We picked on you tonight, didn't we?
Fine.
No.
I have
not a problem.
I have a question that's going to seem like it's off the subject, but it's not. How many parking spaces do you have?
They are over-parked. You guys chose to go 5 per 1,000, I think.
Yeah. I don't remember offhand. I will have that at the next meeting, or I can send you that in an email. I don't remember offhand.
Well, I've seen it whenever one was taken.
Yeah, I have too.
And it's still not that crowded on the inside of the store, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when you came with your site
Big
plan. This
store.
is one of those things where you told me, and you were right. From the standpoint of, I was like, you don't need to have this many parking spaces. You're way over-parked. It's like, no, you're not.
I will give you an accolade, though, which personally I love, because I'm kind of neurotic when it comes to this. I love the double lines that you guys did, which we don't require. I actually went to Ruth, and I said, Ruth, maybe we should incorporate that into our site plan review process. But you're not thought about it. Instead of having a single white line between each parking space, they actually have a double white line between each parking space. That's probably about 12 inches in width, maybe 12 to 18 inches in width. And if you don't like getting door dings, it's great because there's tons of room to get into your car. So thank you. I think that's awesome.
They're 10 by 20 spaces as opposed to 9 by 18.
And they're probably 10 by 20 from the white line, too. Plus that little gap in the middle.
Center.
It is from the, so it's an optical illusion.
Yeah, see, because our minimum parking
9.6,
is
isn't it?
9.5. And see, and I finally figured out that the ones elsewhere in Parkside are 9, and so it's not just that I can't park; they really are smaller.
Right. I love the way that's there to piece. I think it also helps force people to not park straddling on a line or being sloppy. They get in there. For some reason, I just feel like there's lots of elbow room when you're parked, which is I appreciate.
You wouldn't think 6 inches would make such a difference when you're parking, but it really does make a difference.
Yeah,
with
open up the doors.
If you didn't drive a truck, you wouldn't have that problem.
That's true. That's true.
I will say that none of our neighbors over there have been complaining. They're extremely satisfied with the ditch, the landscaping.
Oh, they are very.
They
in
are.
fact, I must say that Powell Acres residents have been extremely complimentary of how Costco worked with them, and they've been very pleased with it. And I actually have a note to myself that since we've had all this rain, I'm going to go down and check out the drainage way after it's a little drier, just because they reworked that drainage way, and they went and hand-laid the rock, so we're hoping that everything stayed. But they did a lot extensive planting in that area. The idea is to get the root systems to go in and hold that dirt, because it was definitely going down to Turkey Creek.
Matter of fact, your landscaping is first class. It really is. I mean, for a big discount store, which usually really scrimps on landscaping, you guys did a great job. Your landscaping, I mean, it's way above and beyond what we require, and you can really, especially when it matures. We appreciate that.
That's basically an edict from the CEO to put in more landscape.
He's just a landscaping nut. He just likes it.
He likes to see that.
Well, it looks great.
Is this for discussion only?
Yes, it is.
Can we go home tonight?
It will go for discussion only again at the next meeting, because you all don't appear to be ready for a vote, because I haven't gotten that invitation at all. Okay, other than
Go ahead.
you want to vote on
We'll
it
have
at
to
the
show
next
up
meeting.
next.
I guess I
I'm
shouldn't
ready.
put words into
We're
your
ready.
mouth. Are you ready to vote at the next meeting? Because I can write it.
I believe so. I think so.
I think
Not
in the
really
interest
sure
of,
how I'll
of the
write it.
applicant, he'd like to know what direction we're going in. I'm ready to vote at the next meeting.
Okay.
It may not be exactly what the applicant wants to hear, but nevertheless, it allows him some direction about what his plan is.
Yeah, in other words, don't spend a lot of time on content.
Well, yeah, that worries me, because, like I said, I read Mark's minutes and I had him explain it to me, and I understand what they're saying. Putting it in words is problematic, or
Yeah, we went over it quite a few times on how to word that.
I mean, I understand what they're saying, but it's just like when it's way so complicated, then that's way so complicated.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for your.
Thank you,
For
Jeff.
the rest of your evening.
Yeah. What's left of your evening? Have a good one.
Proposed location for new utilities.
Costco's closed now.
Safe travels. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Proposed utilities, Ruth.
None.
Oh, thank you.
Will everybody please
I'm nodding
note
off
the
here.
festive package